3:17 in the morning. Asa scrangled halfway through, rises from level 2 of a hospital parking garage. Then silence the wrong kind, thick and held, like the whole building just stopped breathing. The fluorescent tube that's been dying for a month flickers. Dies, flickers again. A man slumped against the door of a black Mercedes, one hand pressed flat to his own chest like he's holding something inside himself that wants out. 3 figures in dark suits standing over him. None of them moving. That stillness isn't calm, it's coiled, sneakers slapping concrete, running toward it. Not away. Because some people hear a cry for help and their feet decide before their mind gets a vote. She rounds the pillar. One of the 3 turns his head slowly, too slowly, like his neck runs on a different clock than the rest of him. And to the east, the first light begins climbing the wall. 3:17 in the morning. That's the number Nadia Kessler will remember later. Not because it means anything. Because numbers are the only thing that holds still when everything else in her life starts moving. Level 2 parking garage. City General. Her shift ended 11 minutes ago. 11 minutes she was supposed to spend walking to her car. Driving home, falling face down on a mattress she hadn't made in 6 days. That was the plan. A nurse's plan. Then the sound came. Not a scream. Exactly. Something under a scream. Steiny's that's a scream. Strangled half through she stopped walking because 12 years in emergency medicine teaches you one thing before anything else. You teach your body to move toward the sound. Not away. Doesn't matter what your brain says, feet already decided, so she ran, slapping concrete. Echo bouncing off support pillars, off oil stains. Off the flickering fluorescent tube 2 spaces down that's been dying for a month and nobody's fixed it. She rounded the corner by the black Mercedes and stopped. A man on the ground. Back against the car door, legs folded wrong, one hand pressed flat against his own chest like he's trying to hold something inside himself that wants out. 3 men standing over him, not EMTs. Not security dark suits. 2 still, the kind of still that isn't calm. It's coiled. Her training says assess the scene before you enter it. Her body already entered it. Hey, her voice came out sharper than she meant. What happened here? None of them answered. One of them turned his head toward her. Slow. Too slow. Like his neck worked on a different timeline than the rest of him. And that's when she should have stopped. She didn't. Because the man on the ground looked up, and his eyes found hers. And there was something in them she'd seen 100 times in a trauma bay. Not pain exactly, recognition. The specific look of a person who has already done the math and knows exactly how the next 60 seconds are going to end for him. Except this time the math was wrong. Because Nadia was there now. And Nadia doesn't do math like that. She had a thermal blanket in her bag, emergency kit. The one she carries out of habit, the one her supervisor teases her about. The one that's about to matter more than anything else she owns. Get away from him. Her own voice, shaking. She heard it shake and hated that it shook and did it anyway. One of the suited men, the one in front, the one whose eyes caught the parking garage light, in a way eyes shouldn't, smiled at her. Not a nice smile. This is not your business. It is now, she didn't think. That's important. Whatever happens later, whatever she has to explain to herself at 4 in the morning for the rest of her life, she needs to remember this part clearly. She did not think. She moved, blanket over his head, over his shoulders. Her jacket next, stripped off and thrown on top before her brain even registered to the decision to take it off. You don't understand what he is, the man said. Voice smooth, voice like something poured rather than spoken. I understand somebody's hurt. Nadia snapped, crouching, positioning her body between the stranger and the 3 men like that meant something. Like 130 pounds of sleep-deprived nurse could stop whatever this was. And you're just standing there. He's not what you think he is. I don't care what he is. And she meant it. In the moment completely. Whatever training kicks in when the alarms go off in a code, that training doesn't ask who deserves saving. It just saves the man beneath the blanket made. Sounds small, broken. Please. He whispered, accent she couldn't place, old, somehow, not an accent from a please. Go. They will kill you too. Not planning on it. She kept her eyes on the 3 men. Kept her arms spread. Made herself wider than she. The leader stepped forward and smiled again. She saw the teeth, not human teeth, not contact lenses and Halloween props. Real, elongating in front of her, catching the thin gray light starting to seep down the ramp from the street above. Her brain did the thing brains do when the input doesn't match any file all free stored inside them. It froze. Then it filed the information under later and kept her moving anyway. Move aside, the leader said. This does not concern you. Like hell it doesn't. She doesn't remember deciding to say that either. The sky was changing, she felt it before she saw it. A shift in temperature at her back. A warmth that had no business being there yet. Not at this hour. Beneath the blanket went rigid. A sound half gasp, half sob, smoke. Thin and gray rising from a gap where the blanket had slipped. She didn't decide to do what she did next either. She threw herself over him, full body pressed down until there was no gap left for the light to find. His skin, where her arms touched him, was cold. Not cool. Cold like something left in a freezer. Cold like something that stopped a long time ago, being warm at all. You are making a grave mistake, the leader said, but he was backing away now. Retreating into shadow like the shadow was calling him home. Lord Voss will hear of this, and when he does, both of you will pay then. Gone, all three of them, not walked away. Gone, the way smoke disappears when you close your hand around it. Nadia, a stranger's frozen body under hers. Sunlight climbing the eastern wall 1 degree at a time. My car, she managed. Can you move? I cannot. His voice, strained through gritted teeth. The sun, even this much of it, it is already finished. She looked around. Her own car was 3 rows over. Door still open, tinted windows. Dark inside, blessed Nasifali. Le dark. That car, yours? Yes. But I cannot. Apologizing and help me think. She hooked her arms under what she guessed were his shoulders. On 3 we move fast. 1 she wasn't listening anymore. 2. 3. She heaved. He was heavier than he looked, and lighter than he should have been, both at once, and somehow between the two of them they half crawled, half dragged themselves across 3 feet of open concrete that felt like 3 miles. Sunlight touched them both as they moved. He screamed, not loud, worse than loud. A sound clenched down to almost nothing, because some part of him, even in agony not to be heard. She smelled it before she understood it. Burning, not fabric. Flesh. They tumbled into the back seat together. She slammed the door shut with her heel. Darkness. Immediate. Total. The tinted glass swallowing the whole violent morning whole. For a long moment neither of them moved. Both of them breathing like they'd run a marathon neither had trained for. Are you hurt? Not a question so much as a demand disguised as one. Did they touch you? I'm fine. Her hands shook so hard she could barely make a fist. Are you? Let me see. He drew the blanket back. Slowly. Like he was afraid of what she'd see. Or afraid of what she'd do once she saw it. She wasn't ready. Skin pale as something that had never once in its whole existence seen a beach. Hair white, not gray. Not silver white. The white of first snow before anybody's walked on it. And a burn across his left hand. Angry and red and lifted to hers. Silver, not a color she'd ever used to describe a human eye. Old. Impossibly achingly old in a face that looked 30. You should not have done that, he said. Quiet, almost angry. You should have let them finish. Do you have a first aid kit? He blinked. What? A first aid kit, she said again, already reaching for the glove compartment because some habits don't care what kind of night you're having. Your hand needs cleaning before it gets infected. It will heal on it. Fire. 90 seconds ago. I am not as fragile as I. That's pretty fragile by any definition I know. A pause, then impossibly, given everything, something that was almost a smiles. Small. Surprised at itself. Fair enough. The back seat, the glove compartment held gauze antiseptic. Burn cream. The catch you keep when you expect someday to need it exactly like this. She worked in silence for a minute, cleaning, wrapping. Her hands steadier now that they had a job to. What's your name? She asked, not looking up. A pause long enough that she glanced at him. Cassian, he said. Cassian Ashgrove. Though that has not always been the name I carried. Centuries, right? That's usually how this goes. You say that like you already know the story. I don't know anything. She tied off the last strip of gauze. Sat back. I think I might be having some kind of breakdown actually. That feels more likely than the alternative. You are not, you would say that. I wish it were true. Quiet again. It would be kinder than the truth. And the truth is vampires are real. I am one. The men in that garage were sent to kill me. And now because of what you did they know your face. Nadia sat very still. Outside the sun kept rising, indifferent to all of it. Say that part again, she said. The last part, they know your face. Something in his voice, regret maybe, or the beginning of it made the sentence land harder the second time. I am sorry, you saved my life. And the only thing I have given you in return is danger. Great, flat. Fantastic. My mother always said I should have gone into accounting. He almost laughed, caught himself. Watched her instead like he was trying to memorize something before it disappeared. You are taking this remarkably well. I'm in shock. Ask me again in 6 hours. You are a nurse. How did you the scrubs, he said. Gently. And the way you moved assessment before action. Most humans freeze, you didn't. 12 years in emergency medicine will do that. It is more than training, a fact, not a compliment. Training does not make a person throw herself over a stranger while he burns. She didn't have an answer for that, so she didn't give one. Instead, she reached for the thing that had been sitting at the edge of her attention since the garage, small, almost forgotten in the chaos. Except it wasn't forgotten, it had lodged itself somewhere and stayed. One of them, she said slow, the leader. He had a ring. Cassian went still. Not the ordinary kind. Scribed silver. A bird on it. Wings folded, sat spread, like it just landed. She frowned, pulling the image back into focus. Why? Because I have seen that mark before. His voice had dropped, lower. Careful, it does not belong to any vampire's house I know. Meaning what? Meaning it belongs to humans. Nadia felt something cold move through her chest that had nothing to do with the vampire beside her. My father used to wear a ring like that, she said. I remember it from when I was a kid. He stopped wearing it years before he died. I always thought he'd just lost it. The silence that followed had weight, actual physical weight, like something you could lean against. Your father, Cassian said carefully. Tell me about him. Died 8 years ago. Car accident, they told us. She stopped, started again, except my mother never believed that. She used to say things. Late at night. Things that didn't make sense to me at the time. I thought grief was making her paranoid. What kind of things? That he knew people he shouldn't have known, that the accident wasn't an accident, that somebody came to the house a week before he died and he locked himself in his office for 6 hours afterward and wouldn't tell either of us why. Cassian's jaw tightened, just slightly. Just enough that she caught it. What did your father do for a living? Federal work. He never said exactly what kind, just federal investigations. He traveled a lot when I was a kid, came home different sometimes, quitter Nadia. Her name in his mouth, for the first time she hadn't told him yet, she realized. And the fact that he already knew it landed somewhere strange before she understood why, then she remembered. Her ID badge still clipped to her scrub top. That's not my question, she said. My question is why a symbol from my father's old jewelry is on the finger of somebody who just tried to kill you. I do not know yet. Honest at least in that, but I intend to find out. And I think he stopped himself. Think what? I think your father may have known things about my world that very few humans are permitted to know. And I think that knowledge may have gotten him killed. The car was very quiet after that. Outside the sun kept climbing. Inside, something else had started climbing too. A different kind of light. The kind that doesn't burn skins. The kind that just makes you see something you wish you hadn't. The descent, they waited in that car for 3 hours. 3 hours is a long time to sit 6 inches from a man who isn't strictly speaking a man. Long enough for Nadia's hands to stop shaking. Long enough for her mind to stop screaming and start, instead, doing what it always does under pressure. Cataloging, filing. Building a chart in her head the way she'd build one for a patient she didn't understand yet. Symptom 1. Does not tolerate sunlight. Confirmed violently twice. Symptom 2. Cold to the touch. Confirmed on contact. Fangs. Visible under threat response. Confirmed. At range. In poor light. But confirmed. Diagnosis. None of this makes sense. Proceed anyway. That last part wasn't a medical instinct. That was just hers. Had always been just her. Her mother used to say it like a warning. You don't stop to ask if the fire's safe, Nadia. You just walk into it. His phone buzzed twice during the wait. Each time he glanced at it and didn't answer. Jaw working like a man doing arithmetic he didn't like the answer to. Reinforcements, he said finally before she could ask. They will not reach us until the sun weakens, a few hours yet, so we sit here. We sit here, great conversation starter. So vampires. How's that working out as a species? He looked at her sideways. There it was again, that almost smile. Like his face wasn't sure it remembered how to make one, and was relearning slowly, out of necessity. Poorly at the moment, he said, there is a war, or the beginning of one. Was one of a small number of rulers trying to prevent it. 3 others like me have died in the last decade. Lord Voss believes the old laws that keep us hidden from your kind are outdated. He believes we should rule openly. That we are owed dominion. And you disagree. I lived through what happens when your kind discovers mine. Quiet. The temperature of his voice dropped several degrees, and it had nothing to do with the blood in his veins. 300 years ago. I watched entire courts burn to ash by frightened men with torches and iron. I do not intend to watch it happen again in an age when your frightened men have far worse than torches. Nadia sat with that. That's actually a good argument, she admitted. I was expecting something more regal and vague. You wanted regal and vague? I wanted a reason to stop being terrified of you. You're making it difficult by being reasonable. I could try being less reasonable if it would help. Don't you dare. By the time the black van arrived, windows like solid panels, guards moving with a grace that had no business existing a parking garage, the assassins were long gone. But nobody in that van looked like they believed the danger was over. A woman stepped out first. Tall, white-haired, eyes the color of crushed violets, moving like she'd never once in her life stumbled on anything. My lord. Crouching by the open car door. It is safe now, transport is UV shielded. Eyes something in Cassin's shoulders loosened. Relief me though it was hard to tell with him. His face didn't seem built for easy tells. Your timing as always, borders on suspicion. I would say providential, my lord, but I take your meaning. Her eyes moved to Nadia, sharpening with open curiosity. Is the human who saved your life? Nadia Kessler. Something in the way he said it, a note that hadn't been there a few hours ago. She threw herself over me. Shielded me with her own body while the sun was rising. Isolde's violet eyes widened. Just like, truly. I did what anybody would do. Nadia said, feeling suddenly, absurdly exposed, standing in a garage in a torn tank top while a 500-year-old woman studied her like a puzzle. No, simply you did not. Very few would. Fewer still would have survived the attempt. They loaded into the van. That's how long the drive took, though it felt longer. Felt like crossing a border she didn't have a map for. The van slowed at what looked like an abandoned warehouse on the industrial edge of town. Then the back wall, which was not, it turned out, actually a wall, rolled open onto a ramp descending into blue-lit dark down. Down for what felt like several stories, lead strips tracing the walls in pale cold light, until the ramp opened onto a space that made Nadia stop breathing for a full second. Vaulted stone ceilings. Old subway architecture reworked into something between a cathedral and a palace. Chandeliers that had no business hanging in a converted tunnel, throwing warm gold light against that had absorbed a century of city noise before anyone thought to make it beautiful. Vampires moved through the space. Dozens of them, all pale. All graceful in that same unsettling way. All turning, almost polite, to stare at the human walking among them. Welcome to Valehaven. Watching her face for a reaction he seemed almost nervous to see. Nadia turned in a slow circle, trying to take in all of it at once and failing completely. This is a lot, she said. Is that good or bad? Ask me again once I've had coffee. I believe that can be arranged. The chambers. The room they gave her was too large for one person, and too beautiful to be real. A sitting area arranged around a fireplace that shouldn't have been able to draw properly. 3 stories underground, and yet somehow did. A writing desk. A bedroom beyond it with a 4-poster bed that looked imported whole from some century that didn't have furniture catalogs. This is too much. Standing in the middle of it, arms crossed, feeling smaller than the room wanted her to feel. You saved my life. Cassian stood in the doorway, not quite entering, like stepping fully inside would be its own kind of question. I could give you a palace and it would not be sufficient repayment. I don't want repayment. Then what do you want? She thought about it, really thought, because the question deserved an honest answer. I want to understand what happened to my father, she said finally. And I want to know I made the right call this morning. Not the safe call. The right one. Something moved behind his silver eyes. Guilt, standing next to gratitude, uncomfortable roommates in the same small space. You did, he said, I swear it. And I will help you find the truth about your father, even if it does not lead where either of us wants it to. Why would it lead somewheres neither of us wants? Because truth rarely leads anywhere convenient. He held her gaze a beat too long. There are clothes in the wardrobe. My assistant Dorothea will bring you anything else you require. Rest, Nadia. You have earned it several times over today. He turned to go, stopped at the threshold. Didn't look back right away. What you did this morning, he said. Throwing yourself over me while the sun rose, that is the bravest thing I have witnessed in 3 centuries. I wanted you to know that before anything else happens here. Then he was gone. Door closing soft behind him, the click of the latch absurdly ordinary against everything else that had happened in the last 6 hours. Nadia stood alone in a room built for royalty, in scrubs that still smelled faintly of smoke, and did the only thing that made sense. She sat down on the edge of the bed and let herself shake for exactly 90 seconds. Not longer. She timed it, the way she times everything, an old habit from the ER. You allow yourself the reaction. You set a limit. Then you get up and function, because falling apart on a schedule is functioning. 90 seconds. Then she stood up and went looking for that coffee. The knock came 40 minutes later, soft. 2 taps, a pause, one more, a rhythm too deliberate to be anything but a habit built over years. Come in. The woman who entered was human. Nadia knew it the second she saw her, warmth in the skin, ordinary brown eyes. The particular tiredness of someone who has worked hard for a long time and made peace with it. It's Miss Kessler. A gentle voice. Steady hand folded in front of her like she'd learned, somewhere along the way, to keep them still even when the rest of the world wasn't. I'm Dorothea. I manage the household for Lord Ashgrove. I hope I'm not intruding. You brought coffee. I brought coffee. Then you're not intruding, you're a miracle worker. Dorothea's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a laugh she seemed willing to give a stranger on the first day. She poured. The smell hit Nadia like something from another life, something ordinary and safe, and for a second the whole impossible morning cracked open just enough to let a little normal back in. 12 years, Dorothea said, when Nadia asked how long she'd worked here. Hired straight out of graduate school. I've been with him ever since. And you know what he is, I've always known. No hesitation. Lord Ashgrove has never lied to the people who work for him. We understand the risk. We choose to stay anyway. Why? Dorothea considered the question the way a person considers something they've been asked before but never gotten tired of answering honestly. Because he's a good man, she said. Vampire, I should say, but the word doesn't change the truth of it. He pays fairly. He protects the people under his roof. He is trying against a great deal of resistance to keep the peace between our world. That's worth something to me, the war. He mentioned it. Lord Voss. Something flickered behind Dorothea's eyes, small, gone almost before it arrived. It's very real, Dorothea said. Careful now, there's a summit coming in a few weeks. All the remaining courts will gather to settle it, one way or another. And if it doesn't go well, then a great many things change. None of them for the better. She straightened, the conversation visibly closing itself back up. Is there anything else you need? Just call me Nadia. And thank you. For the coffee. For all of it. Didn't quite turn around. For what it's worth. What you did this morning, word travels as fast down here. People are talking about you already. Great, Nadia muttered once the door had shut. Nothing like being a rumor on your first day. What the father lefty sleep took her sideways, the way exhaustion sometimes does. Not a decision, just a collapse, scrubs and all. On top of a bed built for someone with better posture than hers. She dreamed of her father's office, not as it was in real memory. Dream logic version. The desk too large, the drawers too deep. Papers that wouldn't stay still long enough to be read. He was there, standing with his back to her the way he used to when she was small and would sneak downstairs past bedtime to watch him work. He didn't turn. Dad, what happened to you? Nothing. Just his shoulders, tense in a way she remembered. The way they got tense the week before he died, the week her mother always talked around and never through. Nadia, he said finally, not turning. You shouldn't be down here, neither should you. He laughed. Well, I shouldn't have been. For a very long time. She woke at 47 in the afternoon, according to a clock on the bedside table, with no idea whether that was morning or evening down here, in a place with no windows, no honest way to measure a day. A soft knock. Dorothea again checking in. You've slept about 6 hours, Dorothea said. His lordship asked me to see that you had everything you needed. Coffee, Nadia said immediately. Sitting up, hair disaster. Mind already reaching for the thing that had chased her into sleep. And can I ask you something? Of course, have you ever heard the term the Watchers or seen a symbol? A bird wings folded on a silver ring. Dorothea's face did something complicated, something that took effort to smooth back into neutral. Where did you hear that? One of the men who attacked Lord Ashgrove was wearing a ring like that. And I remember my father owning something similar years ago. He died 8 years back. Car accident, they said. My mother never believed it. The silence stretched long enough to answer the question before Dorothea said a word. I'll speak with Lord Ashgrove, she said finally. I think this is a conversation the two of you need to have properly. Tonight, if you're willing. I'm more than willing. Then rest a little more first, gentle again, though something behind her eyes hadn't fully relaxed. You're going to need it. What Isolde knows, she didn't rest. Instead she found the gardens, following Dorothea's directions through corridors of exposed brick and old stone that opened, impossible, onto a space full of green. Flowers bloomed under lamps designed to mimic sunlight. A willow tree thrived 3 stories underground, its chigs trailing over a stone bench where a familiar figure sat with a cup of tea she clearly wasn't drinking for the caffeine. Miss Kessler. Isolde didn't look up right away. Come sit. I imagine you have questions, and I have several centuries of answers I've been waiting a long time to use. Nadia, how old are you? She asked bluntly. Subtlety felt like a luxury she didn't have room for anymore. 511 this coming spring. Said the way another woman might mention her age at a dinner party. Mild amusement, no discomfort. I have outlived 4 courts, 2 purges, and 1 exceptionally poor decision involving a duke I do not discuss. Despite everything, Nadia laughed. It surprised her. Sound coming out of her own chest, cracked but real. Lord Ashgrove is special among our kind, Isolde said, watching her with an attention that felt like being weighed. He cares, not performatively, genuinely. Not all of us are so enlightened, shall we say. He mentioned a war. It's not a metaphor. Her voice lost its warmth. Voss has been picking off the old guard for a decade, rulers who honor the ancient laws. 3 of my lord's peers have already fallen. He is, as far as I know, the last king of the old order still standing, and if he falls too, then the laws fall with him. And within a generation your world discovers mine again. Only this time, we would not be facing torches and iron. Steady and old and unafraid. We would be facing each other with weapons capable of ending both our species in an afternoon. That is what's actually at stake here. Not politics extinction. Possibly both of ours. Nadia sat with the willow leaves moving overhead in air that had no business moving. This deep underground. And yet, he likes you, you know, Isolde said, almost offhand. Where I don't know what we are, we met this morning. Under a bird's cymbals and a burning hand. I've never seen him so attentive to anyone, ignoring the deflection entirely. The way he looks at you does not look particularly friendly if you take my meaning. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Isolde finally smiled, small and knowing, but that's a conversation for another day. Tonight I think you have a different one waiting for you. About a ring. And a father. And a debt none of us knew we owed you until this morning. Nadia's stomach tightened. You know something. I know a great deal, Isolde said. Whether it's my place to say it before Lord Ashgrove does. That is a different question. Go rest what little you can. Tonight will not be easy. The dining room was smaller than she expected. Intimate, a single table set for 1, candles and silver holders throwing warm light across dark wood, and Cassian standing at the window when she entered. Not that there was anything to see through it but stone, but he stood there anyway. The way a man stands at a window out of habit even when the view has been taken from him. He'd changed. Black shirt, hair pulled back. And when he turned to look at her, something in his face rearranged itself into an expression she was starting to recognize. Not quite a smile, the anticipation of joining me. Dorothea said we needed to talk. Properly. We do. He pulled out her chair. Please. Eat first. This conversation deserves more strength than an empty stomach can give you. She ate. He couldn't. She realized, watching him not eat with the practiced grace of someone who'd had 3 centuries to get comfortable with the optics of it. But he watched her with an attention that made the food taste better than it probably was. The Watchers, once the second course had come and gone. That is the name in the old tongue for what your Foss ring likely represents, likely. I have not seen that symbol in over a century. Which is in itself troubling. He set down the glass he wasn't drinking from. Centuries ago, our courts required intermediaries. Humans who understood our existence and helped manage the boundary between our world and yours. Recruiters. Fixers. Occasionally enforcers when the boundary needed defending by force. Federal work quietly. That's what he told us. Federal investigations. It is possible that your father's federal work and the Watcher's work were at some point the same work. The room went very still. You're telling me my father knew about all of this? She gestured vaguely at the whole impossible castle around them. And he never said a word. Not to my mother if he was a Watcher. Silence was not a choice he made lightly. It was likely the price of the work itself and the accident. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, he said, and it cost him something to say it. But I intend to find out. Isolde is already searching what records remain. If your father was killed rather than lost, there will be a trail. Our kind is very good at hiding things. We are equally good when it matters at finding what others have hidden. Why does it matter to you? Sharper than she meant. Cassian didn't flinch from it. Because the ring on that assassin's hand connects your father's world to the men who tried to kill me this morning, he said. Which means whatever happened to your father is not 8 years in the past. It is happening again right now, and you are standing directly inside it. Nadia set down her fork. That's not exactly comforting. I did not say it to comfort you. Steady, unflinching. I said it because you deserve the truth, whatever shape it takes. You have already proven once today that you can carry more weight than most people survive carrying. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. Something in her chest loosened, just slightly, not relief. Something closer to being seen. Okay, she said. Then tell me everything, don't soften it for me. All of it will take more than one dinner. Then we'd better start the first week. The days that followed didn't feel like days exactly. Time moved differently underground, measured in meals and conversations instead of sunrises. And Nadia found herself settling into a rhythm she never would have predicted 24 hours earlier. Mornings, whatever hour they actually landed on down here, she spent in the library. Ald had opened its doors without being asked twice, and Nadia lost herself for hours in texts that shouldn't have existed. Records of courts that predated the founding of her own country. Genealogies stretching further than written history had any right to reach. A section, guarded more carefully than the rest. Thin, fragmented, full of gaps that felt less like accident and more like erasure. Someone went to a great deal of trouble, Isolde observed one afternoon, watching Nadia frown over a half-burned ledger, to make sure very little survives about your father's kind of work. That is not carelessness. Whose policy? Isolde said, is the question, isn't it? Afternoons belonged to Cassian. He showed her the compound properly this time. The training grounds, where vampire warriors sparred with blades that moved like something out of a different century entirely. The archive, 3 levels below the library. Climate-controlled, guarded by 2 vampires who didn't so much as blink when the king walked through. You built all of this, she said, standing where a corridor opened onto the underground garden, the false sunlight warm on her face in a way that felt like a small act of defiance against everything cold about this world. Over decades, Cassian said. It began as tunnels, subway and infrastructure. I saw an opportunity where the city saw a liability. Why not build somewhere with actual sunlight, somewhere your people could live like people? Because sunlight is a luxury we cannot afford to want too badly. Something old and tired underneath the words. Wanting things you cannot have is the beginning of resentment. Resentment is the beginning of men like Voss. That's a very careful answer. I have had 300 years to practice careful answers. Do ever give the uncareful kind? He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted behind his eyes. A decision being made, weighed, finally allowed. Occasionally, he said. When the company merits it. She felt that answer land somewhere it had no business landing, given how little time had passed since the parking garage. She filed the feeling away the way she filed everything uncomfortable. Deal with it later. Evenings, more often than not, ended the way that first dinner had. The 2 of them at the small table, candlelight, him not eating and her eating for both of them. Conversation ranging from vampire history to the specific absurdity of modern technology, which Cassian regarded with the bemused suspicion of a man watching a species invent problems it didn't previously have. 300 years, he said one night, and I still do not understand why humans feel compelled to document every meal they consume. It's called content, old man. It is called narcissism with better marketing. She laughed so hard she nearly choked on her wine, and he watched her laugh with an expression she was starting to recognize and starting, despite every warning bell in her head, to look forward to seeing. The first crack it was on the 5th night that thing. Nadia had gone looking for Dorothea, a trivial question about laundry, the kind of ordinary errand that felt strange and grounding in a place this strange, and found her instead in a corridor near the Eastern Archive, deep in hushed conversation with a vampire Nadia didn't recognize. She caught only the tail end. Can't keep stalling him, the vampire was saying, low and urgent. He'll notice the discrepancy eventually. You know he will, I'm handling it. Dorothea's voice, tight in a way Nadia had never heard from her. You'd better, because if this gets back to... Sam stopped talking the second he registered Nadia standing at the end of the hall. Dorothea turned. For a fraction of a second, gone almost before Nadia could be certain she'd seen it, something crossed her face that looked less like surprise and more like fear. Nadia recovered instantly, smooth as glass. I didn't hear you coming. Is everything all right? Fine, Nadia said slowly. I was just looking for you. About the laundry, it can wait, of course. I'll come find you shortly. The vampire had already melted away down a side corridor, gone before Nadia could get a proper look at his face. She stood there a moment longer than she needed to. Filed it away later. But later kept getting closer. What the king knows, she told Cassian 2 nights later. Over the ritual of the dinner neither of them acknowledged as a ritual anymore, though it plainly was one. It's probably nothing, she said, picking at the food in front of her. It didn't sit right. The way she looked at me. The way he stopped talking the second he saw me standing there. Cassian had gone very still. The particular stillness she'd learned, over 5 days, to read as a man calculating something he didn't want to say out loud. What did the other one look like? Tall, dark hair, unusual for down here, everyone else is so pale. Some kind of insignia on his collar. I didn't get a good look. Silver thread. A crescent shape. How did you? That is the mark of my personal counsel. Quiet, and something in his voice had dropped several degrees, gone flat and careful in a way that scared her more than anything Voss's assassins had managed. There are only 6 men permitted to wear it, Cassian. I need to speak with Isolde. Already rising, the meal forgotten. Nadia, I am sorry, I need to attend to this immediately. What's going on? He paused at the door, looked back at her, and for the first time since the garage, she saw something in his face that looked less like a king, and more like a man badly frightened, working hard not to show it. I have had a suspicion for several days, he said, that I did not want to be true. My travel schedule 2 mornings ago, the route Voss's men used to intercept me, that information was known to only a handful of people in this compound. I told myself it was coincidence, bad luck. A leak? Somewhere further out. And now? Now I think one of the 6 men closest to me has been speaking to my enemies. And I think Dorothea may know exactly who the council. The council chamber sat 1 level below the main hall. A circular room, high-ceilinged, 6 chairs arranged around a table of black stone that looked older than the building around it. Nadia wasn't invited, she stood outside, in the corridor close enough to hear raised voices, through a door that didn't quite close all the way. She wasn't supposed to be listening. She listened anyway. You will each account for your whereabouts. Cassian's voice, colder than she'd ever heard it, cutting through the low murmur of protest. On the morning I was attacked. Every one of you. My lord, surely you don't suspect. I suspect everyone, Cassian said, until I have reason not to. That is what betrayal costs, gentlemen. It costs trust that took decades to build, and it does not come back cheaply. A long silence. Someone in this room, he continued, quieter. And somehow that quiet was worse than the cold had been. Gave Voss my schedule. Gave him my route. Gave him the exact window in which I would be weakest and most exposed. That is not carelessness, that's treason. Nadia pressed her back against the corridor wall, heart hammering. Somewhere in that room was a man or a vampire willing to hand Cassian to his enemies. Someone who'd sat at meetings, walked these same halls, maybe even smiled at her in passing over the last days. The door opened. Nadia straightened too fast, caught in the act of listening, but Cassian's eyes when he found her in the corridor didn't hold anger. Only a tired, terrible certainty. You heard? He said. Question. Some of it. Then you understand why I cannot promise Hachu safety the way I did on your first night here. His jaw tightened. One of the people closest to me has betrayed me. And I intend to find out who, before they have the chance to betray me again, or to hurt you in the process of doing it. Behind, through the still open door, Nadia caught a glimpse of 6 vampires seated silent, none of them meeting each other's eyes. She thought of her father, of a locked office door, of 6 hours of silence he never explained. She thought some secrets get people killed, and some people carry them anyway because the alternative is worse. She didn't know yet which kind of secret Dorothy was carrying. She was about to find out it was both. The question she didn't ask: she found Dorothea in the small kitchen off the residential wing an hour later, alone, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. I heard the council meeting, she said, some of it. Dorothea's shoulders tensed before she set the mug down with careful precision. I imagine you have questions. One question. Nadia sat across from her, that night in the corridor. What were you and that vampire really talking about? For a long moment, Dorothea didn't answer. Her eyes moved to the mug, to her own hands, to a point somewhere past Nadia's shoulder that didn't actually exist. Household matters, she said finally. Dora smooth. Too fast. It doesn't concern you. Sharper now, almost pleading underneath. Please, let it go. Nadia studied her the way she'd study a patient whose vitals didn't match their story. Okay, she said finally. I'll let it go. For now. Dorothea's shoulders dropped, something that looked almost like relief. But I don't believe you, Nadia added, and when you're ready to tell me the truth, whatever it is, I'll still be here. She left Dorothea sitting alone with her cold tea. The archives Isolde found her in the archives 2 days later, buried in records that smelled like dust and old paper and secrets nobody had bothered to properly bury. You look like a woman who has not slept properly in some time. I'm fine, you are lying, but I respect at the effort. Isolde's violet eyes drifted over the papers. What have you found? Not enough. Nadia pushed a folder toward her. There's a gap. Right around the time my father died. Records that should exist. Watcher assignments. Court correspondence. Just don't. Not damaged. Not lost. Missing. Someone removed them deliberately.
That is troubling. It's more than troubling.
It means somebody in this world knew my father was going to die before it happened. and went to a lot of trouble afterward to make sure nobody could trace it back to them. Isolde was quiet, turning a brittle page with careful fingers. There is a name, she said finally, that appears 3 times in what remains of these records. Always adjacent to the gap. Always close enough to be suspicious. Never close enough to be proof. Whose name? I would rather not say until I am certain, Isolde said. Accusing the wrong person in this court right now could be as dangerous as staying silent about the right one. Give me a few more days, Nadia. Gentle, but firm. I have survived 5 centuries by knowing the difference between urgency and recklessness. Trust me to know which this requires. Nadia didn't like it. She nodded anyway. The training yard. She found Cassian in the training yard that evening, alone, moving through strikes against a wooden post with a focus so total, he didn't hear her approach until she was nearly at the edge of the sparring circle. He stopped, breathing controlled, unhurried. You should not sneak up on a man holding a blade. You should get better hearing. My hearing is better than yours by several orders of magnitude. He set the blade down. I simply chose not to notice you, for a moment. It is easier to work through frustration when I am not aware of an audience. Frustration about the council. Frustration about everything. He sat on the low stone bench and she sat beside him, close enough to feel the cold radiating faintly off him even through the space between them. I have ruled this court for 3 centuries. I know every one of those 6 men. I have fought beside them, buried friends beside them. And now I have to wonder which one wants me dead. That's a lonely way to live. It is the only way I have ever known how to live. He turned to look at her, something raw in his expression that hadn't been there 5 days ago. Until recently. Isolde thinks she has a name, she said. For the traitor. She wants a few more days before she's sure. Then we give her a few more days. Something tired moved across his face. The worst decisions are ones made in a hurry to feel less afraid. Are you afraid? Right now? He considered the question with the same seriousness he seemed to give everything. Yes, he admitted. Quiet, not for myself. I am afraid for you. You arrived in my world 5 days ago with nothing but a blanket and enough courage to get yourself killed twice over. And every day you remain here, the danger around you grows instead of shrinking. I'm not going anywhere. I did not ask you to leave. Good. Because I wasn't offering. Something passed between them in the quiet that followed. Unspoken but unmistakable. Tomorrow, Cassian said eventually. Stand. I would like to show you the eastern quarter. There is a part of this compound I have not shown anyone in a very long time. Sounds ominous. It is not. It is simply mine. And I find lately that I want to share the things that are mine with you. The room she showed her the next evening wasn't grand. A study lined floor to ceiling with books that looked read rather than displayed. A single window false but painted with such care it took her a moment to realize it wasn't real. A landscape of rolling hills under a sky the deep gold of late afternoon. I had it commissioned 200 years ago, Cassian said, watching her study it. From an artist who never knew what she was painting for. I described a place I remembered from my human life. She painted it exactly as I described it. You remember being human? Fragments. A farm. My mother's voice, though I have long forgotten what she looked like. The particular gold of late summer light across, just before harvest. He touched the frame gently. The way a person touches something they're afraid might not still be there tomorrow. It is strange, the things that survive 300 years and the things that do not. What survived besides the light? He was quiet a moment. A sense, he said finally, that I was loved by people long since dead. That feeling has outlasted every name, every face, every specific memory. Just the feeling itself, smooth like a stone in a river. He turned to look at her. I did not expect to feel it again. Not until a woman threw a blanket over my head in a parking garage and refused, for reasons I still do not fully understand, to let me die. I told you already. 12 years of emergency medicine. That is not the reason. Gently. And we both know it is not the reason. Her breath caught. Cassian, not asking you for anything. Quickly, stepping back half a pace. I know what I am. I know the danger surrounding you now because of me. I would never presume. You're not presuming anything. Her voice cast steadier than she felt. This is a lot. 6 days ago I was a nurse with a exhausting life. And now I'm standing in an underground castle, looking at a painting of a farm you remember from 300 years ago. And I don't know how to hold all of this at once. You do not have to hold it all at once. You only have to hold what is true right now in this room tonight. And what's true right now, that I have not felt this way about another living creature in longer than I can accurately remember. Quiet, steady, terrifyingly honest. And that I am trying very hard not to say so, because I am afraid of what it costs you to be near me. But I find, since standing here, that I am failing rather badly at staying silent. The space between them had narrowed without either deciding to close it. I'm so scared too, Nadia admitted. Not of you, of how fast this is happening. Of what happened to my father and whether it's about to happen to me. I will not let that happen. You can't promise that. No, he agreed. I cannot. But I can promise I will spend every resource I have trying to prevent it. In my world, that is very close to everything. She believed. That was the terrifying part. Not the vampires, not the assassin. The terrifying part was how completely, how quickly she believed him. The second attack had happened on the 8th night. Nadia had gone to the garden alone, the false sunlight and the willow tree becoming a kind of anchor in a world with no real sky when the lights flickered. Once, then again. She'd been in enough hospitals during enough storms to know the difference between an ordinary power fluctuation and something else. This was something else. The lights didn't flicker like electricity struggling. They flickered like something was testing them, probing. Then they went out entirely. Darkness total and sudden, and inside it, a soft, deliberate footsteps that weren't trying very hard to be quiet because whoever they belonged to wanted her to know they were there. Miss Kessler, a voice she didn't recognize, smooth, amused. How fortunate to find you alone. Her back found the willow's trunk, mind racing through options with the particular clarity only true fear seems to produce. No weapon, no way out she could see. A vamp had to be moving too quietly, too confidently, close enough that his voice hadn't needed to carry. Who's there? A friend of Lord Voss, the voice said. Here to deliver a message. You should never have interfered in the garage. You made yourself part of a war that was never yours to join. Funny. Nobody asked my permission before dragging me into it. A low laugh closer now. Close enough that she felt, rather than heard, the shift of air near her shoulder. Brave, the voice said. Or foolish. It is often difficult to tell the difference in the moment with your kind. She didn't have time to answer. The lights came back on all at once. Not the soft ambient glow of usual hours, but full emergency brightness, harsh and white. And in that sudden light she saw him. Tall, dark-eyed. A blade already half drawn from beneath his coat. And behind him, moving with a speed that turned the space between them into something closer to a blur than an action, Cassian. The fight lasted seconds. Real second. Brutal and economic. Ending with the intruder pinned against the willow's trunk, Cassian's forearm at his throat, silver eyes gone dark with something that had nothing left of the gentle man who'd shown her a painted farmhouse 2 nights before. Who sent you? The intruder said nothing. Who sent you again? And something in his voice made even Nadia's blood run cold. You know who sent me, the man finally spat. This was only ever a warning. Next time it will not be. Then he was gone, vanished the same way the garage assassins had vanished, faster than her eyes could track, and Cassian turned to her immediately, hands finding her shoulders, checking for injury with a desperation that had nothing controlled left in it. Are you hurt, Nadia? Are you hurt? I'm fine, I'm okay. He pulled her against him and she let him, feeling the tremor running through his frame that had nothing to do with cold. I should never have let you wander this compound alone. Into her hair. Voice raw. This must be to the safe place in this city and I have let it become anything but Cassian. She pulled back enough to look at him. This isn't your fault, it is entirely my fault. His jaw tightened. Somebody in this house knew you would be here, alone tonight. That is not a coincidence, that is information, given by someone with access to both my schedule and yours. The implication settled over both of them like a weight. The traitor wasn't just endangering Cassian anymore. The traitor was endangering her. What Isolde finally says. Isolde came to Nadia's chambers that same night, her face drawn tight in a way Nadia hadn't seen on her before. I have a name, she said, without preamble, closing the door behind her. I did not want to give it to you until I was certain. After tonight I can no longer afford the luxury of certainty. I must act on probability instead. Tell me. There are 2 names that keep surfacing near the gaps in the record. 2 people with access to both Lord Ashgrove's schedule and as of 8 days ago's grave. One is a member of his council, a man named Fenwick, who has served 3 decades and has, as far as I can determine, a gambling debt large enough to make almost any betrayal financially attractive. And the other, Isolde hesitated, genuinely, in a way that scared Nadia more than the attack in the garden had. The other is closer to this house than any council member, closer to you specifically than anyone else here. The floor tilted. Dorothea. Isolde didn't confirm it outright. Her silence was confirmation enough. I do not know which of the 2 it is, she said. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither, and I am chasing shadows built from an old woman's paranoia. But someone close to this house nearly got you killed tonight, and I will not sit on a name out of caution while that keeps happening. She left Nadia alone with the name sitting heavy in her chest, Dorothea. The woman who'd brought her coffee on the worst morning of her life. Who'd sat across from her with careful hands wrapped around cold tea and begged her to let a secret go. Whatever Dorothea is hiding, Nadia thought, it isn't simple. Nothing about the look on her face that night was the look of a woman committing treason for money or ideology. It was the look of someone protecting something or someone. The confrontation she went to find Dorothea before Cassian could. Some instinct told her the truth would come out more easily between two women in a small kitchen than between a king as a suspect in a formal chamber. You know, Dorothea said before Nadia had even fully entered the room. Not a question. Isolde has a name, 2 names. Yours one of them. Dorothea's hands, wrapped around the mug, went white at the knuckles. I never wanted any of this. It's quiet. Broken. You have to understand that, whatever you think of me after tonight, I never wanted this. Then tell me what happened. Dorothea looked up. Her eyes, ordinary brown human, were wet. 2 months ago someone took my daughter. The words landed like a physical blow. She's 19, voice shaking now, the careful composure of 11 days finally cracking wide open, studying abroad. Or she was, until a man came to her apartment and explained, saying, very polite, that she would remain safe as long as Hastha provided certain information, on certain occasions, about Lord Ashgrove's movements. Voss, I never learned the name for certain. I was too afraid to ask questions that might get her killed faster. A tear broke free, wiped away, furious at her own weakness. I have worked for that man 12 years, Nadia. 12 years, and I love him like family. And I still handed him to his enemies one piece of information at a time because I could not bear the alternative. What kind of person does that make me? A mother, Nadia said quietly. Given an impossible choice by people who deserve every bit of the blame you're putting on yourself instead. I nearly got you killed tonight. You gave someone information. You didn't hold the knife. Nadia sat down across from her. You need to tell Cassian. Tonight before Isolde does it for you in a way that doesn't leave room for anyone to understand why. He'll never forgive me. You don't know that I betrayed him. Her voice cracked entirely. Repeatedly. Deliberately. There is no version of that story where forgiveness makes sense. Then let him decide that, Nadia. Gently but firm, instead of deciding it for him. Dorothea sat with that for a long silent moment. Then finally she nodded. The smallest, most exhausted nod Nadia had ever seen a person give. Will you come with me when I tell him? Every step of the way. The council again. They found Cassian in the council chamber, already deep in conversation with Isolde, the 6 council members summoned again. The whole room crackling with the particular tension of people who know something terrible is about to be confirmed. Dorothea stood in the doorway a long moment before stepping inside. Nadia stayed half a step behind her.
My lord. Shaking, but she didn't let it stop her. I need to speak now.
Cassian's expression went through several things in rapid succession. Confusion. Dawning understanding. Something that looked almost like grief arriving early, ahead of confirmation. Dorothea. I gave them your schedules, like ripping something stuck too long to her skin. Twice. Maybe 3 times, I've lost count. They took my daughter, my lord. 2 months ago, and every time they called, they made it very clear what would happen to her if I didn't comply. The council chamber had gone utterly silent. Why did you not come to me? Cassian said. Quiet. Devastated underneath the quiet. 12 years. 12 years. And you did not trust me enough to come to me the moment this began? I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid you'd act, and acting would get her killed faster than staying silent would. I told myself every single time this would be the last time. I would find another way. And every single time, I was too much of a coward to actually find it. Cassian was quiet for a long, terrible moment. You endangered me, he said finally. You endangered Nadia tonight, directly, whether you intended it or not. That is not a small thing. I know, and yet. He looked at her. The anger slowly giving ground to something else. You are not the villain in this story, Dorothea. You are a mother, cornered by men without conscience, forced into an impossible choice by people who deserve every bit of my anger far more than you do. My Lee will find your daughter. Something in his voice now that hadn't been there a moment ago. Not just a king's fury but a king's resolve. Tonight, I will use every resource this court has left. But you cannot work both sides of this any longer. Not because I do not understand why you did, because it will get someone killed. Dorothea broke down fully then, and Nadia stepped forward, an arm around her shoulders. Cassian turned to his counsel. Dorothea was coerced, he said. But someone gave Voss the means to coerce her. Someone told him she had access worth exploiting. That person is still in this room, or close enough to reach it. And I promise all of you here and now I will find them. His silver eyes moved slowly across the 6 seated council members. None of them held his gaze for long. One of you, Cassian said,
Quiet final.
has betrayed me. And I intend to find out which one, before the summit arrives and gives Voss the perfect stage to finish what he started in that parking garage 11 days ago. Nadia stood in the doorway, Dorothea shaking against her shoulder, and understood, with the particular clarity that comes at the end of a very long night, that whatever peace the last 11 days had given her, it was over now. The war Cassian had been fighting quietly, in shadow, for decades, had found its way to her front door. There was no walking back out of it. Not for her. Not for any of them. Not really. Not the kind that counts as. Because how do you sleep after a night like that? A traitor confessed. A king's fury still hanging in the air like smoke that hasn't found the door yet. A missing girl somewhere out there, 19 years old, held by men who don't blink at using her as leverage. Closed her eyes. Counted backward. From 100 the way she used to tell anxious patients to do at 3 in the morning. Got to 62. Gave up. She got dressed instead, found the corridor to the council chamber empty now, candles burned down to stubs, the air still carrying that particular electricity a room holds after something enormous has happened inside it. Cassian was there. Alone. Still in last either, she said.
I do not sleep the way you do.
He didn't turn around. But no. I did not rest. Any news on Dorothea's daughter? Isolde has people moving, discreet people. The kind who find things without making noise about it. He finally turned, and the face he showed her wasn't a king's face, it was a tired man's face, 300 years old, and none of them showing until right now all at once. We will find her, Nadia. I promised Dorothea. That I intend to keep it. I believe you, do you? He studied her. Because I am not certain I believe myself some mornings. She crossed the room. Sat on the edge of the black table, which probably violated some ancient protocol. Nobody had bothered explaining to her yet. You found me in a parking garage 11 days ago. Burning, dying, and you're still here, still fighting. So don't tell me you don't believe yourself. I've seen the evidence. Something in his shoulders loosened. Just slightly. You have a talent, he said, for say exactly the thing a man needs to hear at exact the moment he has stopped believing anyone will say it. Occupational hazard. Comes with the scrubs. I do not think that is entirely it, no, she admitted. Not. The search begins. By midday the compound had transformed, not visibly, not to a stranger walking through it, but Nadia could feel it. A tightening, a quickening. Vampires moving with more urgency than the languid grace she'd gotten used to over 11 days. Guards doubled at every entrance. Isolde stationed in the archive with 3 assistants and a map of the city covered in pins. Her name is Josephine, Isolde said when Nadia found her there. Dorothea's daughter, 19. We have 3 confirmed sightings since. All of them pointing toward a property on the southern edge of the city. One Voss has used before. For exactly we gone in already. Because Voss is not a fool. And because a compound holding a hostage is, by definition, a trap for anyone who comes to retrieve her. We move carefully, or we do not move at all. Nadia understood that I hated it anyway. How long? She asked before careful becomes too slow. Isolde didn't answer that, which was itself an answer. Dorothea's room. She found Dorothea sitting on the edge of her bed, hands folded, staring at nothing. You don't have to sit with me, Dorothea said without looking up. I know how this looks. I know what I've cost this house. I'm not here because I have to. Dorothea's eyes lifted. Wet again, though there was nothing left in her to cry with, it seemed. They're going to find her, Dorothea said. Half question, half prayer. They're going to find her. You can't promise that, no. Sadius beside her. But I can promise I'm not leaving until they do. Neither is Cassian. You gave 12 years to that man before you gave anyone a single piece of information they shouldn't have had. I think that counts for something. Dorothea's hand found Nadia's, squeezed it. Didn't let go for a long time. You're kind, she whispered. Kinder than I deserve right now. Kindness isn't a reward system, Nadia said. It's just what you do. For people. Especially the ones who need it most and believe it least. The father's file that evening, Cassian brought her a folder. Thin, unremarkable from the outside. The kind of thing that shouldn't be able to hold the weight of 8 years of unanswered questions. Isolde found this, he said, setting it on the table between them. Buried 3 archives deep. Took her people 2 days. Nadia's hands weren't steady when she opened it.
Photographs.
Her father, younger than she remembered him, standing outside a building she didn't recognize. Reports, names redacted. Dates intact. And near the bottom, a single page typed, unsigned, that made her stomach drop clean through the floor. Subject requested extraction from active watcher duty. Request denied. Subject threatened disclosure to external journalist. Recommend containment. Recommend containment. That's not an accident report. Her voice came out strange to her own ears. Flat, far away. That's an order. I am sorry. Quiet. Genuine. I wished very badly that this would tell a different story. He wanted out. She kept reading it. Reading the same 3 lines over and over, like repetition might soften what they said. He found out something, enough to want out, enough to threaten going public. And they decided that was too dangerous to let happen. It appears so. The Cassian. Whose order was this? He was quiet a moment too long. I do not have a name yet, only an office. A designation used by an internal division of the Watchers that answered, historically, to whichever court held the most influence over human affairs at the time. 8 years ago, that would have been Voss. Nadia finished. Cold settling into her bones deeper than any parking garage Dawn had managed. It was Voss. Or somebody working for him. I cannot confirm that yet. But you believe it. He met her eyes. Didn't look away from the answer, even though it cost him to give it. Yes, he said, I believe it. Nadia sat with the folder in her lap, 8 years of grief rearranging itself, in real time, into something with sharper edges. Her mother's late-night whispers. The locked office door. 6 hours of silence. Nobody's explained. All of it suddenly had a shape. Didn't on an accident, she said. Not a question, a fact finally allowed to be a fact. He died because he tried to do the right thing, and somebody decided that made him a liability instead.
Yes.
I want, Cassian. Whoever gave that order, you will have it. He said, I swear that to you. The same way I swore to find Dorothea's daughter. Some debts a man carries until they are paid. This has become one of mine. The raid word came at midnight. Isolde moving fast down the residential corridor, robes still settling around her. We have her location confirmed, she said. The southern property. Guards but fewer than expected. Voss has grown careless. With him, it is often difficult to tell which. When do we move? Cassian said, before he changes his about being careless. Nadia was already reaching for her jacket. You're not coming. Flat. Final or trying to be. Watch me. Nadia, I'm a nurse. Cassian. If that girl has been held for 2 months, she's going to need medical attention the second you get her out. And none of your very impressive, very cold-blooded soldiers know the first thing about triage. She was already lacing her boots. You need me there. He looked at her for a long moment, frustration and something that looked, underneath it, like pride warring on his face. You will stay behind the line, he said. Whatever happens. Fine, I mean it, I said.
The southern property.
The building sat low and industrial against the night sky, windows boarded, a chain-link fence sagging in one corner like it had given up on its own job years ago. 6 vampires moved ahead of them. Spread wide, as silent as held breath, Isolde stayed close to Nadia's shoulder, a blade at her hip that hadn't been there in the garden days. Stay here, Cassian said at the fence line. Behind the line. I meant it. I heard you the first time he was gone. Before she finished the sentence. Not walk? The next 4 minutes were the longest of Nadia's life. Sounds from inside, not worse than loud. Controlled breathing. The specific economy of violence that doesn't waste time being dramatic about itself. A shout cut short. Something breaking went. Then Isolde's hand on her arm now moved. They crossed the yard at a run. Through a door hanging half off its hinges, into a corridor lit by a single bare bulb, and into a back room where Cassian was already kneeling beside a girl huddled against the wall. 19, thin in a way that spoke of 2 months of very little food. Eyes wide, unfocused. Josephine. Nadia dropped to her knees, training taking over before fear had the chance to. My name's Nadia, I'm a nurse, you're safe now. The girl's eyes found her face. Something in them cracked open slowly. My mother, Josephine whispered. Is my mother? She's waiting for you, Nadia said. We're going to get you back to her right now. The girl started to cry then. Not loud. Just steady, silent. Nadia held her. Checked her vitals with hands that had gone perfectly steady. Cassian watched from a few feet away. Didn't interrupt. When she finally looked up at him, there was something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not relief exactly, to awe. What? She said. Nothing. Quiet. I am simply watching you be extraordinary again. I find I do not tire of it. The reunion. Dorothea was waiting when they returned. Standing in the main hall, arms wrapped around herself, and when the doors opened and she saw her daughter walking through them, thin, exhausted, the sound she made wasn't a word. It was something older than words. She crossed the hall at a run. Josephine met her halfway. And the two of them collapsed into each other. Mother and daughter. 12 years of careful composure and 2 months of terror finally allowed to fall apart all at once, in front of an entire court of vampires who, for once, had the decency to look away. Nadia stood beside Cassian. Watch, you did that, she said quietly. You kept your promise. We did that, he corrected. You held that girl together in a room that smelled like blood and fear until she believed again that safety was a real thing. I only opened the door. Opening the door mattered, so did everything after it. He looked at her, something unguarded in his expression now. I do not think I have ever wanted anything the way I want to keep you safe. And I do not think I have ever been more afraid of failing at something. In 300 years of trying not to fail at things. You're not going to fail, you cannot know that. No, she admitted. But I believe it anyway. Sometimes that's the only kind of knowing a person gets. The quiet after later that night, Cassian found her in the garden, sitting beneath the willow, the false stars glowing faint overhead. He sat beside her without asking. She let him. Josephine will recover, he said. Isolde has arranged for a physician. The physical wounds at least will heal quickly. And the rest takes longer. They sat in silence a while. Comfortable silence, the kind that had taken 11 days to earn. I keep thinking about my father, Nadia said finally. That file. Recommend containment. 3 words and they took everything from us. My mother spent 8 years grieving a man who died trying to do the right thing. And she never even got to know that's what he was doing. You could tell her, I don't know how. Hey mom, turns out vampires are real. Dad knew about it. And he was murdered for trying to blow the whistle. There's no version of that conversation that doesn't sound insane. There rarely is with truths this large. His hand found hers tentative. But I have found, in 3 centuries, that the truths worth carrying are rarely the comfortable ones. Your father believed something was worth the risk of losing everything. That is not a small thing to have inherited, Nadia. Whether you ever tell your mother or not. She turned to look at him. Silver eyes catching the false starlight, patient present. I'm falling for you. She said. Direct, I don't know when it happened. Somewhere between the burning hand and the painted farmhouse, and watching you tear a building apart, to save a girl you'd never met. But it happened and I'm done pretending it hasn't. Cassian was quiet a long moment. I have been in love with you, he said finally. Since a woman threw herself over my body while the sun rose and told 3 armed men she did not care what I was. I have simply been too a coward until tonight to say so. You. A coward. About this apparently, yes, a small smile, real this time, unguarded. 300 years of facing down assassins, wars, the slow accumulation of grief that comes with outliving everyone you love. And none of it frightened me the way saying that sentence just did. She leaned into him, felt the cold of him settle against her, familiar now, no longer strange. Say it again, she said. I love you, Nadia Kessler. Good, whispered. Because I love you too, and I'm terrified of what that's going to cost both of us. So am I, he admitted. But I find tonight that I would rather be terrified beside you than safe without you. The message arrived 4 days later. No return address, no signature. Just a single sealed envelope left at the compound's outer entrance, discovered by a guard doing his usual sweep, and inside it, a single photograph. Nadia, standing in the garden. Taken from somewhere close, somewhere she never noticed anyone watching from. On the back, in careful handwriting, some things are inherited, others are simply taken. Your father learned the difference too late. Ask Lord Ashgrove what happens at the summit when the courts learn what he has been hiding beneath his own roof. Cassian's face, reading it, went through several things at once, fury, fear. Something that looked underneath both like grim resignation. He knows about us, Nadia said. Voss, he knows, he has known for some time, I suspect. This is not information, this is theater. Setting the photograph down carefully, like it might detonate if handled roughly. He is telling us he could have hurt you already, and chose not to, because a warning serves his purposes better than a body. What happens at the summit? What is he threatening to reveal? Cassian was quiet. The old laws forbid a ruling lord from taking a human as a consort during active wartime. It is considered a vulnerability. A weakness an enemy could exploit. Which he is already doing, Cassian agreed. If he raises this at the summit, publicly, formally, it will not simply embarrass me. It will give him grounds to argue I am unfit to hold my seat at all. Nadia felt the floor tilt again, the same sick vertigo of watching a private grief become a public weapon. So I'm not just in danger, I'm a liability to everything you've spent decades trying to protect. You are not a liability, sharp enough that she startled slightly. You are the reason I still believe any of this is worth protecting at all. Do not let his poison make you doubt that. That is precisely what he wants. But he's not wrong, is he? About what this costs you if it comes out. Cassian didn't answer right away, which was itself an answer. The council divided. The next council meeting was worse than the last. Fenwick, the council member Isolde had named alongside Dorothea, the one whose gambling debts made betrayal financially attractive, stood at the center of the chamber, and for the first time, spoke without being asked. "My lord," with respect he said. "The photograph proves Voss already knows what half this court has quietly suspected for 2 weeks. If we go to the summit with this unresolved, he will not need to plant a single lie. The truth alone will be enough to end your seat." "Are you suggesting," Cassian said, voice gone very quiet, "that I abandon her?" "I am Fenwick said, not backing down, "that 300 years of your leadership, and everything it protects, might be worth more than one relationship, however genuine." The room went utterly silent. Nadia felt every eye shift toward her, the particular awful weight of being discussed as a variable in an equation rather than a person in a room. "Get out," Cassian said. Low final. "Get out, Fenwick. Before I decide your loyalty is worth investigating as thoroughly as Isolde has been investigating everyone else's." Fenwick left. The rest of the council followed, none of them meeting Cassian's eyes on the way out. When the room finally emptied, Cassian sat down heavily, head in his hand, and for the first time since the parking garage, Nadia saw him look genuinely, completely lost. "He's not wrong," she said quietly, sitting beside him. "Fenwick. About what this costs you." "I do not care what it costs me, you should." She reached for his hand. "I've watched you fight for 11 days to protect people who aren't even your own kind. I won't be the reason all of that falls apart. And I will not sacrifice you to save it," Cassian said, lifting his head, silver eyes burning. "I have watched good men convince themselves that necessary cruelty is still cruelty worth committing. I refuse to become one of them." "Then what do? We go to the summit," Cassian said, "and we let them see exactly what Voss wants hidden, not a weakness. A choice. My choice, made with clear eyes, that love and duty are not, in fact, opposites, whatever men like Fenwick and Voss have convinced themselves to believe. That's a gamble. Everything worth doing is," he said. "Your father believed that. It is, I think, why I've come to admire him so deeply, though I never had the chance to meet him." What Isolde uncovers about Fenwick 2 nights before they left for the summit. Isolde came to them with a face Nadia hadn't seen before. Not triumphant. Not grim either, something more complicated than both. "I have an answer," she said. "Then it is not the answer I expected." "Tell us," Cassian said. He did sell information, small things. Court gossip, minor scheduling. Nothing that ever endangered your life directly, in exchange for money to cover his debts. That much is true, and he will answer for it under our own laws, not Voss's. Isolde's expression didn't soften. But he did not know what the information would be used for. He did not know about Voss. He believed he was selling gossip to a rival court steward for coin. "A fool's crime, not a traitor's." "And the attack in the garden," Nadia said. "The one that nearly killed me, was that him?" "No," Isolde said. "That trail leads only to Dorothea, and to the man who coerced her. Fenwick's greed is real and it will be punished. But he is not the second betrayer I feared. There was only ever one path Voss used to reach this house. Dorothea's grief, weaponized by men who understood exactly how to use it." Cassin's jaw worked, sleep and disgust moving across his face. "Fenwick will be stripped of his seat and his access," he said. "He will not stand trial as a murderer's accomplice because he is not one. But he will never again be trusted with anything that matters in this court." "That seems fair," Nadia said. "It is fair," Isolde agreed. "Which is, I have found, the rarest outcome in matters like this." The night before, the days that followed, moved faster than any of the 11 before them. Preparations, strategy sessions, Isolde poring over precedent and old law with an intensity that left dark circles under eyes that didn't technically need sleep to begin with. Nadia found herself pulled into all of it. Not as an observer, as a participant. If Voss argues the old laws are outdated, that they only protect humans at vampire expense, what's the actual counter-argument? The one that isn't just tradition for tradition's sake. That the laws protect both species, Isolde said. That the moment vampires reveal themselves and dominate, humanity does not simply lie down. It fights back, and the war that follows destroys far more than it preserves. That's the argument he's already making, though. Cassian's version, yes. Then it's not landing hard enough. Nadia frowned at the notes spread across the table. Voss's whole pitch is emotional. Pride. Superiority. You can't beat an emotional argument with a purely logical one. You need something that makes the room feel the cost, not just understand it. Isolde studied her with new interest. "What would you suggest?" "Let me speak," Nadia said. "As a human. Let me tell them what it actually looks like from our side when something like this goes wrong." "That is precisely what Voss is trying to prevent," Isolde said slowly. "Precisely what your father's death was meant to prevent, according to that file." A human voice speaking plainly. About what the truth actually costs when it comes out badly. Then maybe it's to somebody let that voice finish what he started. The night before they left, Cassian came to her chambers, restless in a way she'd rarely seen from him, 300 years of composure fraying at the edges. I am afraid, he admitted, standing at her window that wasn't really a window. Not of Voss. Not even of losing Cicete. I am afraid of what happens to you, standing in that hall tomorrow in front of every enemy I have ever made. I'm afraid too. Then, perhaps we should not do this. Cassian, she crossed the room, took his cold hands in hers. My father died because he believed the truth mattered more than his own safety. I spent 8 years not understanding that. I understand it now. Tomorrow I get to finish what he started. Not by accident this time. On purpose. With my eyes open. That is a heavy inheritance to claim. It's the only one that ever really mattered. She reached up, touched his face. Whatever happens tomorrow, win or lose, seat or no seat, I need you to know something. I don't regret a single second of the last 2 weeks. Not the garage. Not the burn on your hand. Not the traitor or the ring or the file that broke my heart. All of it led here. Cassian didn't answer with words. He answered by pulling her close, cold lips finding her, gentle and certain, and for one long moment, the war outside the room, none of it mattered at all. Tomorrow, Cassian murmured, against her hair, we go to war with the truth as our only weapon. Then we'd better make sure it's sharp enough. I believe, he said, for the first time in a very long while, that it is. The road to neutral ground. The convoy left at dusk. 3 vehicles, windows blacked out against a sun that would rise somewhere over their heads while they slept the day away in transit. Guards rotating watch. Even inside a vehicle, Nadia had been assured, twice now, was completely secure. She didn't feel secure. She felt like a woman riding toward a courtroom where the verdict had already been written by somebody who hated her before they'd ever met her. You're quiet, Cassian said, his hand finding hers in the dark. I'm rehearsing what you'll say. What I won't let myself say. There's a version of tomorrow where I stand up in that hall and just scream at all of them. Tell them exactly what I think of a room full of immortal beings arguing about whether my species is worth protecting like we're livestock at auction. That version doesn't win anybody over. So I keep rehearsing the version that might. You do not have to be perfect tomorrow. You only have to be honest. I have watched honesty do things in that hall that clever rhetoric never manages. Voss is clever rhetoric. Voss is also, I suspect, more afraid than he lets anyone see. His thumb moved absently across her knuckles. Men who are certain of their own righteousness rarely spend as much energy as he does trying to convince everyone else of it. She managed a small laugh and rested her head against his shoulder as the boundary marker for neutral territory slid past the window, a stone pillar older than the country she'd been born in. Tell me about the last summit, she said. Before I ask you to walk me through tomorrow's, tell me what it was like the last time. Cassian was quiet a moment. Brutal, he said finally. Not in violence. In exhaustion. 3 days of argument, precedent, old grievances dressed up as new logic. I remember feeling by the 3rd day that I had been awake for a century and you won barely. By a margin that still keeps me awake some night, wondering how differently it might have gone. His eyes found hers in the dim light. The margin is narrow. Zoristis this time has spent a decade building alliances I am only now beginning to understand the full shape of. Stubborn, I believe. You're the most stubborn creature I've ever met, and I work 12-hour shifts with drunk college students who think they're invincible. High praise from a nurse. The highest, she said, and meant it more than the joke let on. The castle, it rose out of the mountains, the way something built by people who'd never worried about a budget tends to rise. Graced towers, candlelight glowing gold from 1,000 narrow windows. The whole structure looking less like an actual building and more like something a storyteller invented to frighten children into good behavior. Home of the Council of Elders, Cassian said, watching her take it in. They maintain neutrality here. All feuds suspended the moment we cross this threshold. It is, as far as anything in my world goes, sacred ground. It's beautiful. It has also seen more blood spilled in secret than any place I know. Beauty and danger are rarely strangers in my experience. You should remember that walking these halls tomorrow. They were met at the gate by ancient vampires in formal robes, credentials checked with a thoroughness that felt almost bureaucratic against the gothic weight of the architecture. Inside, the halls stretched vast and echoing, tapestries and banners marking centuries of history Nadia had no context for and no time left to learn. Vampires turned to stare as they passed, some curious, some openly hostile. A human walking these halls was clearly a rare enough sight to draw attention from every direction. Cassian kept his hand at the small of her back the entire walk. They're all staring, she murmured. Let them stare. Tomorrow, they will have a great deal more to look at than a woman walking beside me. What Isolde brings. Isolde arrived an hour later. Robes still dust-streaked from the road. Carrying a folder Nadia recognized instantly. The twin of the one Cassian had shown her days ago. Except thicker now. I did not want to give you this until we were here, she said, setting it down carefully. Where whatever you decide to do with it can be acted upon immediately. What is it? A name, Isolde said. The one attached to the order in your father's file. Recommend containment. I found the signature beneath it, finally buried under 3 layers of redaction that took longer to strip away than I anticipated. Nadia's hands weren't steady opening the folder, a single name typed beneath a title she didn't recognize. Office of Internal Compliance, Southern Court. Voss's court, she said. Voss's court, Isolde confirmed. I cannot prove Voss himself signed the order. But the office that did answers and has always answered directly to him. Whether he gave the order personally or simply permitted it to be given in his name, the distinction matters less than you might think in a court where his word has always been absolute. Nadia sat with the folder in her lap for a long time. I want to use this tomorrow, she said, in the hall. Cassian and Isolde exchanged a look. That is a considerable risk, Isolde said carefully. Accusing a sitting lord of murdering a watcher, without incontrovertible proof, in front of the full council, if it fails to land, it could hand Voss exactly the outrage he needs to discredit everything else we intend to say tomorrow. And if it does land, if it lands, Cass said slowly, it does more than protect my seat. It exposes him for precisely what he is, in front of every vampire who still believes his talk of strength and superiority is anything other than a man willing to murder the innocent to protect his own power. Then it's worth the risk, Nadia said. It is your father's death, Isolde said gently. Your risk to take, more than either of ours. Are you certain? Once this is said aloud, there is no taking it back. I've been certain since the moment I read that file, she said. I just needed to know I wasn't the only one willing to say it out loud. You are not. Ken, quiet and fierce it. You will never be alone in that hall tomorrow, Nadia. Whatever else happens, the last quiet hour they didn't sleep in the hour before dawn. Sat together instead, Cassian's arm around her shoulders, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on both of them. If this goes, Nadia said finally, if the vote goes to Voss, if the name in that file isn't enough, what happens to us? We survive it. The same way we have survived everything since a garage and a burning hand. Together or not at all, that's not really an answer, it is the only honest one I have. He turned to face her. I cannot promise you tomorrow ends the way we want it to. I can only promise that whatever it costs, I will be standing beside you when it happens. I'll take that, it's more than most people get. It is more than I ever expected to have again, he said. After 300 years of believing I had already spent whatever capacity I had left for this kind of certainty. Outside, somewhere beyond the thick stone walls, the sky was beginning to change, dawn, and with it, the summit. And with the summit a truth that had waited 8 years to finally be spoken aloud in a room full of people who very much did not want to hear it. Whatever happens today, Nadia, standing, smoothing the burgundy dress Isolde had insisted she wear, I need you to know something. Tell me, my father spent his whole career keeping secrets that protected people who could never say thank you. Today, I get to keep his secret out loud for once, in front of everyone. I think wherever he is he'd be proud of that. Cassian took her hand, pressed it briefly to his lips. Then let us go make certain it was worth it, he said. Together. They walked out to meet the dawn, and whatever waited for them inside it, side by side, neither one letting go of the other's hand until the doors of the summit hall opened in front of them. The summit hall swallowed sound the way old stone does. Vaulted ceiling. Rows of seats curved into a all facing a raised dais where the council of elders sat, robed ancient, unreadable. Hundreds of vampires filled those seats. Hundreds of pale faces turning one by one as Cassian led Nadia down the center aisle toward the front row reserved for ruling lords. She felt every eye. Felt them like weight. Like pressure against her skin. Because this wasn't a room built for humans. This was a room built to remind humans, if they were ever foolish enough to enter it, exactly how small they actually were. She kept walking anyway. They reached the front row, sat in a cross-circle in the seats reserved for the southern court. Nadia saw him for the first time in the flesh, Malachi Voss. Tall. White-haired like all of them, pale like all of them, except something about his face refused the word beautiful the way the others earned it. Something cruel sat underneath his features. Something patient. A predator who had learned a long time ago that patience was simply violence given more time to work. His eyes found hers red. Not silver. Red and amused and entirely without mercy. That is Voss? Cassian murmured. Do not let him see that he frightens you. Too late, Nadia thought. But she lifted her chin anyway. The elder at the center of the dais rose, voice carrying without effort to every corner of the vast room. Lord Voss of the Southern Court has called this summit to propose changes to the ancient laws. He will present his case first. Voss stood, moved to the center of the floor with the unhurried grace of a man who had never once doubted the outcome of anything he set his mind to. Here it comes, Nadia thought. Whatever this is, here it comes. The first argument, my fellow immortals. Voss's voice filled the hall without seeming to raise itself at all, smooth, compelling, the particular cadence of a man who had rehearsed cruelty until it sounded like reason. We have lived in shadow far longer than shadow was ever meant to hold us. We have constrained our strength, limited our nature. All out of a fear inherited from ancestors who never once questioned whether that fear had outlived its purpose. Murmurs. Scattered agreement, rippling through parts of the hall like wind through dry grass. The old laws tell us we cannot kill when we feed. That we cannot reveal ourselves. That we must live as shadows among a species that outnumbers us 1,000,000 to 1. But I ask you, why should the strong live in fear of the weak? Nadia's hands curled into fists in her lap. These laws were written in an age when humans could hunt us with fire and iron. That age is finished. Today a war between our species would devastate them beyond recovery. We would survive. We always survive. The question is no longer whether we can win such a war. He paused, thus stretch. The question is why we continue pretending we might lose it. More murmurs, louder now. And worse, nodding, scattered across the hall, vampires leaning toward a vision of themselves as gods too long denied their own worship. Voss spoke for 20 more minutes. Laid out a vision of a world remade, vampires ruling openly, human governments bent quietly to their will, an empire built in shadow and finally allowed to step into the light it had always, in his telling, deserved. When he finished, the applause was not universal, but it was loud enough to matter. Cassian's answer. Lord Ashgrove of the Northern Court will now present the opposing view. Cassian rose. He looked smaller than Voss standing there. But something else radiated off him instead. A quiet gravity that made the hall, gradually, lean forward rather than back. Lord Voss speaks of strength, of a fear he believes we have outgrown. I wonder, listening to him, whether he has simply forgotten why that fear was written into law in the first place. A ripple of tension through the hall. I was there, Cassian continued, 300 years ago, when the last great purge began. I watched courts I had known my entire existence burn to ash in a single season.
I watch people I love turn
to by humans who feared us exact as much as Voss now insists they no longer do. Silence total across the hall. The old laws were not written to make us weak. They were written so that we might survive our own strength. Why would we burn all of that down for the promise of a throne built on the same mistake that nearly ended us the first time? Because we are better than hiding, Voss called out. And what happens when they resist? Because they will resist, Lord Voss. Humans are nothing if not resilient. They will meet us with everything a modern nation possesses. And even if we win that war, even if every one of us survives it, what will we have won? He let the question hang. A world of, Cassian said, quiet now, ruled by gods nobody worships out of love. Only fear. Is that truly the empire you are offering this room? It does not sound to me like victory. It sounds like the same mistake, dressed in better rhetoric. The applause when Cassian finished was scattered. Real but scattered, not the overwhelming response his argument deserved. It's not enough, Nadia thought. He's right. And it's still not enough. The floor opens. Testimony followed. Vampires rising one after another to speak for one vision or the other. Then Isolde rose. I am 511 years old, she said, moving to the center of the floor. I remember the purge Lord Ashgrove speaks of. I lost my entire family to it. Every person I loved, turned to ash by human hunters who believed,
correctly,
that we intended them harm. Silence absolute across the hall. I do not say this for your sympathy. I say it so that you understand precisely what it costs when this argument goes wrong, and I tell you, with the certainty of 5 centuries behind me, that if we follow Lord Voss's path, we will face another purge. Perhaps the final one. The one none of us survive. You are old and frightened, Vosses, not waiting to be recognized. Clinging to laws written by people even older and more frightened than you. The world has changed. Humans are distracted. Divided. You are gambling with the survival of our entire species, Isolde shot back. And you are wrong. The debate stretched on. Voices rising. Tension coiling tighter with every exchange until Voss, with the timing of a man who had been waiting the entire session for precisely this moment, turned and looked directly at Nadia. I see Lord Ashgrove has brought a human guest to our summit, How touching. Perhaps, since we are debating the fate of her entire species, we should ask what she thinks. Every eye in the hall turned to her. Her heart climbed into her throat. This was the moment she'd rehearsed for it. She still felt, in the instant it arrived, entirely unprepared. What she says. She stood, legs unsteady beneath her the way legs get when adrenaline floods a body faster than courage can catch up to it. She walked to the center of the floor anyway. My name is Nadia Kessler, she said, and was relieved, distantly, to hear her voice come out steady. I'm a nurse. 3 weeks ago, I didn't know any of you existed. Now I'm apparently the closest thing to a representative my entire species has in this room. So let me say what I think since you asked. She turned slowly, meeting as many eyes as she could. Lord Voss says you're distracted, divided. That we'd never unite against you. He's right about the distraction. He's right about the division. But there's one thing that ends both of those faster than anything else on earth. A common enemy. If you reveal yourselves, if you try to rule us the way he's describing, you will become that enemy. Every government, every ordinary person, with a phone and a reason to be afraid. All of it, aimed at you. We would win, Voss said cold, from across the hall. Maybe, Nadia agreed. But at what cost? How many of you would burn, the way Isolde's family burned 3 centuries ago? And even if, what would you actually have? A species that fears and hates you, that spends every generation after this one trying to finish us the war you started. You are biased, Voss said, sneering now. His pet speaking on his behalf. I'm not defending him because I love him, Nadia said, and felt the hall shift at the word. I'm defending him because I've watched what he actually does with the power he has. He tore a building apart with his bare hands to save a kidnapped girl who wasn't even his own kind. That's not the behavior of a man chasing an empire. She paused, felt the next part rising in her chest. And since we're discussing whether your kind can be trusted with the truth about mine, let's discuss what happens to humans who learn your secrets and try to do the right thing with that knowledge. Voss's expression flickered. Barely. But she caught it. My father was a watcher, Nadia said. 8 years ago, he found something he believed the public deserved to know. He asked to be released from his duty. His request was denied. When he threatened to go public anyway, someone gave an order. She held up a single page, the typed order. The 3 words that had rewritten 8 years of her life the moment she'd read them. Recommend containment, she read aloud into the vast silence of the hall. Not murder, containment. As if my father were a leak to be patched. Instead of a man with a wife and a daughter who spent 8 years believing a car accident took him instead of a decision made by someone in this room. The hall had gone utterly silent now. That order came from the Office of Internal Compliance, Southern Your Court, Lord Voss. Whether you signed it yourself or simply permitted it to be signed in your name, I'd like you to explain to this room the difference, because I've spent 8 years grieving a man your court decided was worth erasing. The silence stretched, then broke. The hall erupts. Voss's composure cracked for exactly 1 visible second, and then he laughed sharp. Deliberately dismissive. A grieving daughter, weaponizing an unverified document to smear a sitting lord. The signature has been verified, Isolde said, by 3 independent archivists. I would be happy to submit it to the council for formal review if Lord Voss believes the verification insufficient. This is a summit about the future of our laws, Voss snapped. Not a tribunal for one grieving human's private grievance. It is precisely relevant, the eldest elder said, and her voice silenced the hall more completely than anything else had managed all day, because the argument before this council today is whether the old laws, which forbid exactly this kind of extrajudicial containment, remain necessary. Lord Voss has just been accused credibly of violating those very laws to silence a human who threatened to expose vampire affairs. That is the debate. Voss's red eyes swept the hall. Found less support in them than they had 5 minutes earlier. Then perhaps, the elder said, the council should formally review the Southern Court's compliance records, alongside the vote on Lord Voss's proposals, both matters decided together. Nadia walked back to her seat on legs that had stopped shaking somewhere in the middle of her speech and started again, adrenaline finally catching up with her all at once. Cassian reached for her hand the moment she sat. Squeezed it hard. That was extraordinary, he murmured. I do not know how to thank you properly for what you just did. You can thank me, she whispered back, by making sure my father's name means something, after already does, Cassian said. More than you know. The vote. The council called for a recess. Vampires poured out of the hall in restless clusters, the political weather of the room visibly shifting with every passing minute. Cassian led Nadia into a quiet side corridor, away from the crowd, and pulled her into his arms the second they were alone. You may have just changed the outcome of this entire summit. Or doomed us both. Voss looked ready to kill me up there. He will not touch you. Something fierce entered his voice. I would die before I allowed that. Don't talk like that. I mean it. I know you do. That's exactly why I need you not to say it. She pulled back to look at him. No one's dying today. We're going to get through this together. They stood there a moment, foreheads touching, until footsteps interrupted it. How touching, a voice said. Cold, familiar. They sprang apart to find Voss standing a few feet away, flanked by 2 guards. Lord Voss, Cassian said, stepping instinctively between him and Nadia. You are breaking protocol, approaching us outside the hall. Protocol is precisely what today's testimony threatens to unravel for me. So forgive me if I no longer feel especially bound by it. His red eyes moved past Cassian, settling on Nadia. I underestimated you, little nurse. You are more than a pet. You are a weapon he is using against me. She is not a weapon, Cassian said, low and dangerous. She is a person, and you will not threaten her. Or what? You will attack me here, on neutral ground, and hand the councils the exact violation they need to strip your seat instead of mine? What do you want? Cassian said. I want you to withdraw your opposition, Voss said. Simple and blunt. Now support my proposals. Let the vote pass unopposed. Do that. And I will personally see to it that this document your human found never surfaces publicly again, and that her life continues undisturbed. You're offering to bury evidence of murder in exchange for a vote, Nadia said. That's not a negotiation. It is an offer, made once. Refuse it and I promise you both, the Costas testimony will follow you far longer than this summit. The old laws stand, Cassian said. My opposition stands. And you can take your offer, Lord Voss, and choke on it. Something dark moved across Voss's face. Then she dies, he said, and lunged. The corridor fight. He was faster than anything Nadia had seen move. Cassian was faster. They collided with enough force to crack the stone floor beneath them, and the fight that followed had none of the choreographed grace Nadia had half expected. It was brutal, economical. Fangs and claws, blood that looked black in the dim corridor light. Both of them slamming into ancient walls that had survived centuries and would carry these new scars for centuries more. Voss guards moved to join, and Solt was suddenly there, blade drawn, blocking their path. This is between them. Anyone who interferes answers to me. Neither guard moved again. Cassian gained the upper hand, catching Voss in a hold, bending him backward, fang extending. Yield, Cassian snarl. Never. Voss spat blood on his teeth. Then I will end this. Stop. Nadia's voice cut through the corridor before she'd fully decided to use it. Cassian, don't. If you kill him like this, you're no better than what he's trying to become. Cassian froze. Fangs inches from Voss's throat, slowly visibly costing him something. He pulled back. Who collapsed against the wall, gasping. You're right, Cassian said, voice rough. You're right, this is not over, Voss said, climbing unsteadily to his feet. Yes, a new voice said it is. The eldest elder had arrived, drawn by the noise, flanked by 2 more members of the council. Lord Voss, you attacked another ruling lord outside the summit hall on neutral territory. That is grounds for immediate expulsion from this council and forfeiture of your seat. He attacked me as much as I attacked him. He defended himself and a guest of this summit against your unprovoked assault. That is permitted under our laws. Your attack was not. She turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. Let this stand as a lesson. This is precisely what results when the old laws are abandoned. Voss looked at Cassian with pure undisguised hatred. This is not finished, he said again, quieter this time. See that you remember the law, the elder said sharply, while you remember your grudge. Any further violation and exile becomes permanent. Voss didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away, guards trailing behind him, the crowd parting to let him pass without a single voice raised in his defense. The vote falls. The hall reconvened within the hour, tension thick enough to taste. The formal vote, when it came, felt almost anticlimactic after everything that led to it. Hand after hand rising in support of the old laws. Voss's own supporters, most of them, choosing silence over public alignment with a lord just caught in an act of unprovoked violence on sacred ground. The council has reached its decision, the eldest elder announced. The old laws stand. They have served us well for 3 centuries and they will continue to serve us. Lord Voss's proposals are formally rejected. Relief hit Nadia so hard she nearly sat down without meaning to. It's over, Cassian murmured. It's over, love. You did this, you are safe. She let herself believe it for exactly as long as it took to walk out of that hall. She should have known better. Why sold fears they gathered that evening in a smaller chamber, exhaustion settling over all of them the particular way it settles after a fight finally ends. Bone deep, relieved, and yet somehow still not fully able to rest. Isolde, however, hadn't relaxed at all. She stood near the window, arms crossed, expression tight. Something's wrong, Nadia said. Perhaps nothing, Isolde said, though her voice didn't match the words. It is only Voss surrendered too easily at the end. A man who spent a decade building toward this summit does not simply accept defeat and walk away with a grudge and nothing more. That is not the Voss I have observed for 5 centuries. He lost the vote, Cassian said. He was exposed as a murderer in front of the entire council. What more could he have done? That is precisely what troubles me. I do not know. And I have learned, across 5 centuries, that when a dangerous man surrenders more easily than his nature would suggest, it is rarely because he has actually surrendered anything at all. You think this isn't finished, Nadia said. I think we should not mistake winning a vote for winning a war. Voss has had 10 years to prepare for the possibility of losing today. I would very much like to know what he prepared before we allow ourselves to celebrate too completely. Cassian's jaw tightened. Then we do not celebrate yet, he said. We investigate tonight if we must. The archive beneath the castle, Isolde led them down, hours later, into a section of the castle Nadia hadn't known existed. A records archive maintained by the council itself, older and more guarded than even Valehaven's deepest vaults. If Voss intended something beyond the vote, she said, moving between shelves with focused urgency, he would have needed access to something old. Something beyond mere politics, a ritual. A binding. Something that does not depend on a council's approval to take effect. You think he's planning some kind of magic, Nadia said. The word felt strange in her mouth even now. I think our laws are not merely written on paper. They are woven in part into rituals performed at the founding of every court, binding certain protections into the very stone of places like this one. If Voss found a way to corrupt that foundation rather than simply outvote it, she stopped. Went very still, staring down at a page. What have you found? She said slowly. Performed only once, centuries ago, at the founding of this very castle. A binding right meant to protect neutral ground from corruption by any single court's ambition. And a counter right, buried in the same text, capable of unraveling it entirely, if performed by someone standing precisely where the original binding took place. The summit hall, Cassian said, cold and immediate. The summit hall, Isolde confirmed. Which Voss stood in for the better part of a day, surrounded by nearly every ruling lord in our world. If he found a way to perform even a fragment of that counter-right unnoticed, beneath the noise of the debate, then the vote never mattered, Nadia said, the full shape of it landing in her chest like a stone. He never needed to win it. He just needed to be in that room. What does the right actually do if completed? Cassian asked. Isolde's face had gone pale in a way Nadia had never seen from her. It does not simply strip protection from this castle, it strips protection from every court bound by the same founding laws all at once. Every barrier, every safeguard our kind has relied upon for centuries gone, gradually, over the span of months, until nothing remains standing between our world and complete exposure. The chamber went very quiet. He's not planning a war, Nadia said slowly. He's planning to make the war inevitable. Whether he wins today or not. Yes, Isolde said. I believe that is exactly what he is planning. The signs begin. They didn't have to wait long just to see its start. 3 days after the summit, word reached Valehaven of the first breach. A vampire community in the northern wilderness, cited openly by hikers who should never have been able to find them at all. No casualties, no violence. Just visibility, sudden and inexplicable, in a place that had remained hidden for over a century. A week after that, a second breach. Then a third. It's spreading, Isolde said, spreading maps across the council table at Valehaven, slowly for now. But it is not slowing down. If this continues at its current pace, within 2 months, every court bound by the old founding right will be at once, to the entire world. Can it be reversed? Cassian asked. Perhaps, Isolde said, though the word carried little confidence. The texts suggest a counterbinding is possible. But it requires a very specific kind of blood. Blood carrying the old Watcher lineage. The same bloodline that once served as the living bridge between our world and yours, back when the original binding rite was first performed. Something in Nadia's chest went very still. My father was Fess. Isolde looked up at her. Something complicated moving behind her violet eyes, hope and fear tangled together. Yes, she said. He was. Which means his blood might be the thing that fixes this. Which means, Isolde said gently, that yours might be as well. The weight of the choice. Nadia sat with that sentence a long time after Isolde said it. Because there's a difference between knowing something abstractly and having it land in your chest like a verdict. Say it again, she said. The counterbinding requires Watcher blood, Isolde said gently. Not simply present in the veins. Active. Which in practical terms, it has to be vampire blood, Cassian said quietly. A watcher's lineage transformed. The blood carries more power once it's no longer merely human. Nadia's stomach dropped through the floor. You're saying I'd have to become one of you? Not eventually now. Fast, before this thing finishes spreading. I am saying that is one possibility, Isolde said carefully. There may be others. I have not exhausted every text yet. How long do we have? Isolde didn't answer right away, which was by now an answer she'd learned to recognize. Weeks, she said finally. Perhaps less, Cassian took Nadia in. His grip was steadier than his voice. I will not ask this of you, he said. Whatever choice you make, it will be completely. I refuse to be the reason you feel cornered into a decision this large. You're not cornering me, Nadia said. The world is cornering me. There's a difference, even if it doesn't feel like much of one right now. The phone call she didn't make that night. Alone in her borrowed chamber, Nadia sat with her phone in her hand for the better part of an hour. Her mother's number right there. One tap away. She'd rehearsed the conversation 100 times over the last Razik, never once found a version that didn't sound insane out loud. Hey mom, remember dad? Turns out he knew vampires were real. Turns out he died because he tried to do the right thing. And now I might become one myself because apparently my blood is the only thing standing between the whole world and disaster. She put the phone down without dialing. Not yet, she thought. I can't give her that much truth yet. Not until I know what I'm actually choosing. Because that's the thing nobody tells you about grief. It doesn't resolve, it just changes shape. 8 years of missing a man who died protecting a secret, and now here she was, about to inherit that exact same secret, wondering if she had the courage to carry it the way he had. A knock pulled her out of the spiral. Cassian standing in the doorway. May I come in, please? He sat beside her on the edge of the bed. Gave her the space to reach for his hand instead if she wanted it. She wanted it. I keep thinking about my father, she said. How he must have known at some point that telling the truth might cost him everything. And he did it anyway. I used to think that made him brave. Now I think it might have just made him stubborn. I don't know if there's actually a difference. There rarely is, Cassian said. Not in the moment it matters. If I do this, if I become what you are, I don't get to unchoose it. Ever no, he said. You do not, and if I don't do it. If there's no other way, and the binding fails, and everything Isolde's afraid of actually happens, then we will find another way, Cassian said. I refuse to let this become a choice you make purely out of obligation to a war that is not, in the end, entirely your choice. It became mine the second I threw that blanket over your head, Nadia said. I made it mine. On purpose. I don't regret it. I just want to make this choice because it's right. Not because I'm scared of what happens if I don't. Then take whatever time you need to be certain, Cassian said. I will not rush you toward an answer, Nadia. Not for this. What Dorothea says. She found Dorothea 2 days later back at Valehaven, Josephine recovering steadily down the hall. Can I ask you something? Nadia, sitting across from her in the same small kitchen where this had all started, weeks ago, with a cold cup of tea and a secret too heavy to carry alone. Anything. You spent 12 years working for a vampire. Watching the choices this world asks of the people in it. Do you ever regret staying, knowing what it's cost you? Dorothea considered the question seriously. There were nights I regretted it deeply. When Josephine was taken, I regretted every choice that had ever brought me anywhere near this world. She reached across the table, took Nadia's hand. But I have also watched that save a stranger who threw herself over him in a parking garage. Watched him tear apart a building to bring my daughter home. Watched him choose mercy over vengeance in a corridor, when every instinct in him screamed for the opposite. That's not really an answer to my question. No, Dorothea agreed with the ghost of a smile. It's the answer to a better one. You're not asking me if I regret staying. You're asking me if it's worth becoming something you're afraid of, for someone worth the fear, and I think you already know what I'd say to that. I think I already know what I'm going to choose, Nadia admitted. I've known for a day or two. I just need somebody else to say it first, so it didn't feel so much like I was talking myself into something. You're not talking yourself into anything, Dorothea said gently. You're just finally admitting what your father already taught you how to do, long before any of this started. Choosing's the harder, truer thing. Even when it costs you everything you thought you couldn't live without. The answer, she told Cassian that night, found him in the small study with the painted farmhouse window, the one place in the entire compound that felt somehow, most entirely. I've made my decision. He turned, braced visibly for whichever answer was coming. Tell me. I want to do it, Nadia said. Not because I'm scared of what happens if I don't. Because I've spent 3 weeks watching what you actually do with the power and the time you've been given. And I want that all of it. I want to build something with you, Cassian. For longer than one human lifetime allows. Something in Cassian's face broke open. Relief and fear and a grief so old it had nowhere left to hide all arriving at once. You understand what you are giving up, he said quietly. The sun. Your mother watching you stay young while she does not, I understand. I've thought about all of it. I'm choosing this anyways. With my eyes open, the way my father chose the truth. This is mine to choose, Cassian. Let me choose it. He crossed the room, took her face gently in both hands, cold palms against her skin, silver eyes searching hers one final time for any trace of doubt. He found none. Then we do not have much time to waste, he said. Isolde believes the transformation, combined with the counter-binding, will need to happen at the same location where the original rite was performed. Which means the Summit Hall, Nadia finished. The Summit Hall, Cassian confirmed. Where this began, where Voss stood, unraveling everything we've spent centuries protecting. It seems fitting in a way I did not expect, that it should also be where we end it. Then let's go end it, together. Together, Cassian agreed, and kissed her, slow and certain. A promise sealed in the quiet dark of a room built around a memory of sunlight neither of them would ever fully have again. And neither of them, in that moment, minded losing it. The return journey, they traveled back to the mountain castle 3 days later. The convoy smaller this time, faster. Urgency replacing the ceremonial caution of the first trip. Are you frightened? Cassian asked, his hand finding hers in the dark, terrified. But not the way I was the first time we made this drive. That was fear of the unknown. This is just fear of the thing itself. I know exactly what's coming now. That doesn't make it easier. It just makes it different. The transformation is painful, he said quietly. I will not pretend otherwise to spare you the truth of it. And there is no undoing it once it begins. I know I need you to be certain one final time before we reach the hall. She turned to look at him, silver eyes steady in the dim light. I'm certain. I was certain 3 days ago. I'm certain. Stop asking, Cassian. I need you to trust the choice I've already made. I do trust it, he said. I simply love you enough to keep checking anyway. The hall at night, the Summit Hall, looked different, empty. Somehow, without hundreds of vampires filling its seats, just Cassian, Nadia, and 2 elders standing witness at the center of the vast circular floor, torches burning low along the walls. The rite requires 3 things, Isolde said, laying out a series of old instruments on a low stone table. A blade, a bowl, a length of cord woven through with symbols Nadia didn't recognize and didn't ask about, blood freely given, a binding word, spoken by one already carrying the old lineage in transformed form, and a witness, standing where the original founding rite was performed, to anchor the new binding in place of the old. I'll stand witness, Cassian said immediately. You cannot, Isolde said gently. The rite requires the witness be someone with no stake in the outcome beyond the survival of both our worlds equally. That disqualifies you rather completely, my lord. Then who I will stand witness, the eldest elder said, stepping forward. It is in the end precisely what this council exists to do. Nadia looked at the blade on the table. Felt her heartbeat climb into her throat despite 3 days of certainty carrying her this far. Tell me exactly what happens. The transformation begins first, Isolde said. Once it is complete, once your blood carries the old lineage in its new form, you speak the binding word here, at the center of this hall, while the elder witnesses. If the texts are correct, the new binding will replace what Voss corrupted. And if the texts are wrong? Then we will have tried everything within our power, Isolde said, and faced whatever comes next with the only thing left to us. Each other. Do it, Nadia said. Now before I let myself think too hard about it, the transformation. Cassian's hands were gentle as he drew her close, the way they had been every single time he'd touched her since the very first night in the back of a burning car. I will make this as painless as I am able. I promise you that much, at least I trust you. His fangs found her throat with a care that felt, even now, more like devotion than violence. The pain arrived a moment later, sharp, then spreading, a fire under her skin entirely unlike the memory of sunlight burning his hand weeks ago, and yet somehow its distant cousin, the two of them finally, impossible, sharing something that had once belonged only to him. She held on to him as it took her. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her fully was, I have you, he said. I have you, Nadia. Whatever comes next, I have you. What she became, she woke on the floor of the Summit Hall, 3 days later according to Isolde. Though time meant very little in the haze of transformation's aftermath, the world arrived sharper than she remembered it. Every torch flame distinct and vivid, every breath in the hall audible in a way human ears had never managed. Welcome back, Cassian said, kneeling beside her, relief written plain across his face. How do I feel? She asked, her voice strange in her own new ears, stronger, clearer. That is generally the question I ask you, he said, the ghost of a smile finding its way through the exhaustion on his face. She stood steady. Despite everything, it is time, Isolde said quietly. Whatever the binding requires of you, Nadia, you will feel it now, more clearly than either of us could explain it to you in advance. Nadia walked to the center of the hall, closed her eyes and felt it. Something ancient, humming beneath the stone floor, frayed and unraveling exactly the way Isolde had described weeks ago. A rope pulled thin, threatening to snap entirely, and somewhere inside her own blood, a matching thread, waiting to be woven back into place. She didn't know the words. Nobody had taught them to her. And yet standing there, transformed, her father's inheritance finally awake inside her after 8 years of silence, she found she didn't need to be taught at all. The words simply arrived. Old certains. She spoke them. Bind takes light moved through the hall. Not fire, not sunlight. Something older than either. A pale gold thread of energy that rose from the floor beneath Nadia's feet and spread outward, slow and deliberate, tracing the old symbols carved into stone that had waited 3 centuries for exactly this moment. Isolde watched with an expression Nadia had never seen on her herm before. Something close to awe. It's working. The binding is taking hold. The light climbed the walls, traced the ceiling, settled into the very foundation of the castle itself, and somewhere far beyond it, Nadia could feel it, distantly. Every court bound by the same founding right. Every ward Voss had begun unraveling, slow, methodically, over weeks of quiet corruption. All of it. The light faded. Nadia stood at the center of it, breathing hard, her father's blood, her blood now, transformed and awake, humming faintly under skin that would never again feel the sun. Did it work? Completely? I believe so, Isolde said, voice unsteady with relief. The breaches should stop. That should shit? Cassian crossed the hall and pulled her into his arms without a word. You saved us, he murmured into her hair. All of us, both our worlds, Nadia. I think I understand, she said. I think for the first time in 8 years I finally understand exactly what my father was trying to protect. Voss won last time. He was waiting for them outside the hall. Alone this time. No guards, no theater. Just a man standing in torchlight with the ticklish, someone who already knows he has lost everything and has run out of moves left to make. It worked, Voss said. Flat, not a question. It worked, Cassian confirmed. I'm fine, Cassian, Nadia said gently, stepping up beside him instead of behind. I can handle this part myself now. Voss's red eyes studied her, transformed now, and something in his expression shifted, grudging and bitter, into something close to respect. Your father's blood, he said. I always suspected it might matter eventually. That was in truth part of why the order was given at all, not merely his threat to expose us, his lineage. I could not risk what it might someday become in the wrong hands, working against everything I intended to build. You mean my hands? Nadia said. I mean precisely your hands. It seems containment failed rather spectacularly in the end. You murdered my father because you were afraid of what I might do 8 years before I ever knew any of this existed, Nadia said, something cold and steady settling into her voice. That's not strategy, Lord Voss. That's just fear, dressed up in better rhetoric, exactly the way Callan said in that hall, weeks ago. Voss said nothing for a long moment. The council will exile me. Whatever remains of my court, whatever alliances I have built, all of it, ended by tonight. Yes, Cassian said, it will. And you, Voss said, looking at Nadia one final time, will spend eternity as a symbol of everything I failed to prevent. I'll spend eternity, Nadia said, as exactly what you chose to become. Not a weapon, Lord Voss. A promise. That the things worth protecting are worth protecting properly, as instead of through fear and containment and murder dressed up as necessity. Voss held her gaze a moment longer. Then without another word, turned and walked into the dark beyond the torchlight, and this time, nobody followed to stop him. He was, by morning, formally stripped of his title and exiled from every court bound by the old laws. He did not return the council's question. Before they were permitted to leave the mountain castle, the elders summoned them one final time. There is a matter of precedent, the eldest elder said. No human has ever performed a binding rite of this magnitude. We find ourselves without a framework for what this means going forward. Some among the council wish to study Lady Kessler, formally, to understand what her lineage might mean for future bindings, should another crisis of this scale ever arise. Something cold moved through Nadia's chest. Study me not unkindly, the elder said, though the phrase did little to soften it, but thoroughly. Your bloodline may be the last of its kind. That makes you valuable, Lady Kessler. Valuable in ways that history suggests are rarely gentle once fully understood by those with power to act on it. Cassian's hand tightened around hers beneath the table. She is not a specimen, he said, voice low and dangerous. She is my wife in every sense, but the formal ceremony we have not yet had time to hold. If this council intends to treat her as a resource to be studied rather than a person to be honored, I will withdraw my court from every alliance this body has ever extended to me. The chamber went very still. That is a considerable threat, Lord Ashgrove. It is not a threat, it is a fact. I did not fight a war. Watch a woman I love transform herself to save 2 entire species, and stand here now, only to hand her over to be dissected by scholars who value her blood more than her choice to give it freely. Nadia found her own voice steady despite the fear still coiled beneath it. I'll answer questions, she said, meeting the elder's gaze directly. I'll help however I reasonably can if another crisis like this ever comes again. But I decide the terms, not this council, because I spent 8 years watching what happens when powerful people decide someone else's life is simply a resource to manage. I won't let that happen to me. Not after everything it cost my father. The elder studied her for a long moment. Very well, she said finally. Terms negotiated freely then, rather than terms imposed. I believe that is in fact precisely the principle this council fought to preserve. 3 weeks ago, when we upheld the old laws in the first place. Go home, Lord Ashgrove, Lady Kessler. You have both earned considerably more rest than a single council meeting can properly repay. The homecoming. They returned to Valehaven a week later. The underground halls transformed by the news that had already traveled ahead of them. Every vampire in the compound turning to watch as Nadia walked through, no longer merely a human guest, but something entirely new. Dorothea met them at the entrance, Josephine standing beside her, both of them in tears before Nadia had even finished crossing the threshold. You did it, Dorothea said, pulling her into an embrace that felt exactly as warm human as it always had. You actually did it. We did it, Nadia corrected, all of us. Together. That evening, on the balcony overlooking Valehaven's underground city, Cassian took her hand and turned to face her, torchlight catching the silver of his eyes the same way it had on their very first night here, 6 weeks and a lifetime ago. Do you remember that morning, he asked, in the parking garage? Every second. You looked so frightened. I'd never seen anyone look that vulnerable in my entire career. I was certain I was going to die, and then you appeared. A fierce, impossible throwing herself between me and the sunrise, with no reason at all to risk everything for someone she'd never met. He reached into his coat, drawing out something small that caught the torchlight, a plain silver, unadorned, freshly made. I could not give you back a ring your father wore, he said, not the exact one lost to time and grief long before either of us knew this story would begin. So I asked a soul to help me make something new instead. Not a mark of duty forced upon you by circumstance, a mark of choice freely made. Nadia's breath caught. Marry me, Cassian said, quiet and certain. 3 centuries of careful composure finally giving way entirely to something raw and unguarded. I know our kind rarely marries in the way your world understands it. I do not care. I want to bind myself to you in every way this world and yours allow. Nadia laughed, joy breaking through weeks of grief and fear and impossible choices, all at once, bright and real. Yes, she said. Yes, Cassian. Yes, the letter she finally writes. In the quiet weeks before the wedding, Nadia sat down at the writing desk in her chambers and did something she'd been putting off since the night of the transformation. She wrote to her father. Not a letter she could send. Not a letter anyone would ever read, but her just words finally allowed onto paper after 8 years of carrying them silently. Dad, she wrote, I know now. All of it. What you did, what it cost you. Why the office door stayed locked for 6 hours that week you never explained. I met a man who reminded me what you must have believed all those years working in secret to protect people who could never thank you for it. That some truths are worth more than the safety of keeping them hidden. I'm not human anymore. I know that would frighten you if you were here to see it, but I chose it the way you chose your work, with my eyes open, knowing exactly what it would cost, and deciding the cost was worth what it protected. I finished what you started. I don't know if that makes up for what they took from us. But I wanted you to know, wherever you are, that your name means something now. Not containment, not a car accident nobody quite believed. Just a man who tried to do the right thing, and a daughter who finally understood why that mattered enough to risk everything. I miss you every single day, love, Nadia. She folded the letter, sealed, placed it in the small wooden box beside her father's old badge, the one relic of him she'd carried with her since the beginning of all of this. It felt, she thought, like closing a door that had been open for 8 years. Not shut entirely. Just closed enough to finally let something new grow on the other side of it. The mother's visit. Her mother arrived at Valehaven 3 days before the wedding, escorted carefully through the compound by Dorothea, who had become, in the strange weeks since the summit, something between a friend and a guide for anyone new to this impossible underground world. Nadia met her at the entrance, heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with vampire senses and everything to do with 8 years of grief finally standing face to face with the truth. Her mother stopped a few feet away, studied her daughter's face, the same face, though something about the eyes had changed, something sharper and older lived behind them now. "You look different," her mother said finally. "Quiet, careful. I am different, Mom, tell me all of it. From the beginning, I've spent 8 years accepting a story I never actually believed. I think I've earned the real one." So Nadia told her. The garage, the blanket, the burning hand and the frozen fingers. Her mother sat through all of it in silence, hands folded tightly in her lap, tears building and falling without ever quite stopping her from listening. When Nadia reached the file, the 3 words that had rewritten 8 years of grief in an instant, her mother made a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. "I knew," she whispered. "I always knew it wasn't an accident. Everyone told me I was imagining things. I started to believe them, after a while, because it was easier than believing the alternative. You weren't imagining anything. You were right about all of it." Her mother reached out and took her daughter's hands, cold now, in a way they'd never been before, and her mother didn't flinch from the cold at all. "He'd be so proud of you," she said. "Not for becoming whatever this is. For finishing what he started. For refusing to let his death be the last word in the story. I love you, Mom. I love you too, whatever you've become. Whoever you are now, you're still my daughter. That part never changes, no matter how many centuries you end up living through." What the story became. They married that spring, in a ceremony that borrowed from both their worlds. Vampires and the small circle of humans who now knew the truth, gathered together beneath Valehaven's false stars, witnessing a union neither species had ever quite managed before. Nadia's mother came, sat in the front row, still not fully understanding everything she'd been told in the difficult conversation weeks earlier, but there present, watching her daughter choose a life neither of them could ever have imagined. At the ceremony, "I sold crap," though she insisted, loudly and unconvincingly, that it was only dust in her eyes. Dorothea organized every detail with her usual precision, Josephine at her side, fully recovered now, laughing at something Cassian said that made even the elders in attendance crack a rare smile. Fenwick, stripped of his old seat, but permitted to remain in the court under close watch, stood quietly near the back, a small, unspoken redemption in simply being allowed to witness what his greed had nearly cost. When Cassian finally kissed his bride, sealing vows that bound 2 species together in a way the old laws had never quite managed on their own, the assembled crowd erupted into applause that echoed off vaulted stone ceilings, built 2 centuries before either of them was born into the shapes they now carried. Years past dads. Nadia and Cassian ruled the northern court together, not as king and consort, but as true partners, the way she'd insisted from the very beginning. They rebuilt what Voss had tried to unravel, expanded the careful, guarded bridge between human and vampire worlds her father had once helped maintain, and did it in the open finally, rather than in the shadows that had cost him his life. Their story became legend in time, whispered among both species who knew the truth. The human nurse who threw her cloak over a dying king at dawn, and years later, threw herself into a war neither species should have survived, and won it not with violence, but with the truth her father died trying to tell. But for Nadia and Cassian it was never legend. It was simply their life, built choice by choice, from a single act of courage in a parking garage at 3:17 in the morning, the exact moment everything that mattered had finally, irreversibly. 50 years later, on the anniversary of that first morning, Nadia stood once more near the spot where the old garage had stood before the city tore it down and built something taller in its place. Cassian found her there, the way he always did, materializing at her side with the quiet grace of a man who had learned, over 5 decades of marriage, exactly when his wife wanted company and exactly when she wanted the silence to herself first. "Still coming back to this spot," he said. "Not a question, every year." She leaned into him, the cold of his shoulder as familiar now as her own heartbeat once was. "I think about her sometimes. The version of me that used to exist before this. Exhausted, about to throw a blanket over a stranger's head because some part of her couldn't walk past someone in trouble." "I think about her too," Cassian admitted. "She frightened me terribly that morning. Braver than any soldier I had commanded in 3 centuries, and she did not even understand yet what she was risking. Nadia thought of everything the last 50 years had held. The slow, careful work of expanding the bridge between their worlds, done in the open now, the way her father had once wished it could be. Dorothean now, peacefully, in old, having lived to see her daughter grow old herself. Isolde still very much alive, still occasionally complaining about a duke from centuries past she refused, even, to fully discuss. Her mother's grave, visited every year alongside this one, a woman who had lived to see her daughter's transformation fully explained and fully forgiven before passing peacefully at the end of an ordinary human life. Do you regret any of it? Cassian asked. The same question he asked, gently, every single considerate seriously, the way she always. No, she said. Not 1 second. Not the fear, not the grief, not even losing the son. Every part of it led here, to this. To you. To everything we built out of one impossible morning. They stood together in the quiet dark of a city that had long since forgotten the building that once stood there, 2 figures marking an anniversary no history book would ever properly record, and yet the truest one either of them had ever kept, because some stories don't end where the drama does. They simply keep being lived quietly, faithfully, one anniversary at a time, proof, if anyone ever needed it, that a single act of courage, offered freely to a stranger at 3:17 in the morning, can echo far longer than anyone standing in that parking garage ever could have imagined.